This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman.
And Brad Kelly. We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of what drives creative people to create against all odds.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
Each episode, we excavate the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
On every episode, we try and find out just what the hell was wrong with them and how they worked through their darkness to create something that lives on after them and continues to move culture.
Find us online at artofdarkpod.com and on Twitter at artofdarkpod. All right, we've got some sponsors for the pod now.
Wait, what?
Every link you need for the things we talk about here is at artofdarkpod.com/sponsors. First up, books.
If you're into this podcast, odds are you're probably a reader. We've got links to buy new books from bookshop.org and used books from alibris.com.
And if you want to listen to your books, we recommend and use audible.com.
It's great, and the catalog is huge.
All right. So if you're listening to this, you are online.
Maybe you're very online.
You probably have a website or are thinking of starting one. Maybe you want a website like artofdarkpod.com. We built that with WordPress, which is by far the most popular way to create websites. And the single best host for serious WordPress is WP Engine. I've personally used them for over a decade now, and I don't host my websites anywhere else. Go to artofdarkpod.com/sponsors and click on the WP Engine link to learn more.
Finally, the best way to support the show is at patreon.com/artofdarkpod. Get the bonus After Dark content for every episode, access to the book club, and more.
I don't know. But in any case, this is sort of part 2 of the episode. Mother's dead. And Hesse is starting to have real success as a writer. Due to the good notices that Hesse received for Lauscher, and maybe I should just pause to describe what Hermann Lauscher was. Let me just find it on Wikipedia, assuming it has a Wikipedia. Yeah, it does. Let's see. Oh, auf Deutsch. Oh, geez. I'm going to translate this page. This is going to be... Okay. Hinterlassene Schriften und Gedichte von Hermann Lauscher ist ein Buch von Hermann Hesse mit 9 Gedichten und 3 ab der zweiten Ausgabe 5 Prosastückchen. Okay, all right. That's not very helpful. Okay. Where's my translation of this page?
I somehow know less than before.
That's my goal. That's my goal. Writings and Poems Left Behind by Hermann Lauscher is a book by Hermann Hesse with 9 poems and 5 from the second edition prose pieces. Written from 96 to 99, 1896 to 1899. It was published in November of 1900 in the Basel bookstore Reich, where Hesse had been employed. So he's kind of smart here. He's maneuvered his way into a bookstore that's also agreed to like publish his shit. Mm-hmm. Like he's not dumb.
Yeah, no, you gotta do whatever you can trying to make a career.
This is very interesting. He initially presented himself as an editor, and only after his unmasking in 1902 as the author of the writings and poems left behind. So he does this kind of cheeky thing where he's like, "Oh, I'm the editor of this book of poems." So there's this distance, this mask. He wants to be invisible.
I like these kinds of moves. Because there's a certain game within though the quote unquote publishing industry looks a lot different than where he is in place and time. But I love these little games. It's a little bit of a hack, right? As soon as it's like we discovered the brilliant writings of someone dead, there's like a
right. Yeah, exactly. That's not you're getting it. Yeah. In his foreword to the 1933 edition, Hesse wrote, "Every time I have looked through the Lauscher over the years, I have noticed passages that I would have liked to have deleted or changed. They are youthfully arrogant, foolish words about Tolstoy at the beginning of the diary. However, it did not seem permissible to me to subsequently falsify my own youthful portrait." So even later, he doesn't go back. He doesn't George Lucas his early shit. He's this is what it was. And so there's some degree of integrity there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Due to the good notices that Hesse received for Lauscher, the publisher Samuel Fisher became interested in him, and with the novel Peter Kamenzind, which appeared first as a pre-publication in 1903 and then as a regular printing by Fisher in 1904, came a breakthrough. From now on, Hesse could make a living as a writer. The novel became popular throughout Germany. Sigmund Freud praised Peter Kamenzind as one of his favorite readings.
Okay.
Yeah. It happens real fast.
That's a good blurb in the early 20th century.
That's a good blurb now, dude. Yeah. Whatever people think about Freud, and I'm not a huge, I think Freud's influence is horrific and has actually helped to destroy Western civilization, but he had a lot of influence.
Yeah. But, cachet is cachet.
Yeah, I admire Freud, but I just think the cult it's too much. Mm-hmm. And Peter Kamenzind is one of the books that I had on my shelf in the basement.
This one I'm not familiar with. I've heard the name, but I don't know anything about it.
Well, this made him famous. So, and now we're getting into part 2 of the episode where I'm going to be reading the first page or two of a lot of novels. So buckle up.
All right.
In the beginning was the myth. God, in his search for self-expression, invested the souls of Hindus, Greeks, and Germans with poetic shapes and continues to invest each child's soul with poetry every day. As a child, I knew no names for the lakes, mountains, and brooks where I grew up. My eyes beheld the broad, smooth, blue-green lake lying in the sun, glistening with tiny lights and wreathed by precipitous mountains whose highest crevices were filled with glazed snow and thin waterfalls, and at whose feet there sloped luminous meadows with orchards and huts and gray alpine cattle. And on my poor little soul, still blank and calm and full of expectancy, the lake and mountain spirits etched their proud deeds. Rigid cliffs and scarred precipices spoke in tones of awe and defiance of the age that had given them birth. They spoke of ancient days when the earth heaved and tossed, and in the moaning agony of birth thrust mountain peaks and crests from its tortured womb. Rock masses surged upward, screaming and cracking until aiming into nowhere they toppled. Twin mountains wrestled desperately for space until one rose triumphant, pushing his brother aside and smashing him. Even today, you can find broken off crags, toppled or split, clinging precariously to the edge of a gorge. During each thaw, torrents sweep down blocks of rock the size of houses, shattering them like glass or implanting them in the soft meadows. These mountains proclaim a message that is easy to understand when you have seen their steep walls and layers upon layers of rock, twisted, cracked, filled with gaping wounds. We have suffered most brutally, they announce, and we are suffering still. All right.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably you don't graduate from that. That's some pretty good writing. Being interesting. Legit. So just real briefly, just what the plot of it's a Bildungsroman. Peter Kamenzind, as a youth, leaves his mountain village with a great ambition to experience the world and to become one of its denizens. Having experienced the loss of his mother at an early age and with a desire to leave behind a callous father, he heads to university. As he progresses through his studies, he meets and falls in love with a painter and becomes a close friend to a young pianist. Greatly saddened because of the pianist's death, he takes up wandering to soak up the diverse experiences of life. So you can see how out of his own life, he's sort of fantasizing about going to university, but something terrible happens, and then he goes to experience the real life of wandering and da-da-da. Okay. Yeah. And this was a hit. There you go.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right. So what is a young man who has a successful novel come out and who now has money? I mean, from this point on, I mean, he wasn't always. He would eventually especially I think during World War II, the money got there. We had we're going to come to it. They had problems, but at this point, it was I don't exactly know how much money he had, but he had enough money to just quit his day job from this.
Sweet. Yeah.
Whoop, whoop. Yeah. What is it? What is a young man gonna do after that? What does he need next
Yeah, I
after he's got?
mean, he's a writer type, he might buy a sports car or he might go traveling.
He needs a wife, Brad.
No rush.
You got to no. This is you got to remember, Brad. This is a time where he's got two options, like literally prostitutes or a
Yeah.
wife. That's
Right,
it.
right,
And
right,
I
right.
don't think our Herman is going to go. I don't know. I don't know if he was a prostitute guy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he goes looking for a
Okay.
wife.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay. Yeah. Oh my God. So many books. Okay.
Kevin has been knocked over by his stack of books.
it's like really like a Jenga situation here. I love this. I'm so happy. Let's see. Let's go. So, well, this is a little bit about Kamenzind. Uh, Hesse's first novel had clearly emerged from his recent past, but it also prefigured the conflicts into which he now entered. Yeah, that Lauscher book is not a novel. This was his first novel.
Right.
He joined some of his artist friends on a spur of the moment trip to Italy. One of the painters in their circle, a woman who was moving to Italy, invited some friends to accompany her to Florence over Easter. At first, Hesse had decided not to go, but he allowed himself to be persuaded by Maria Bernoulli. It was a departure for more than just Italy. Where are you going?
Oh,
Because
just
of the Bernoullis?
Bernoulli. Yeah. Is that the Bernoulli? Okay.
What do you know about the Bernoullis?
There's a principal. There might be two Bernoulli mathematicians because I know there's something about one of the things is about something about large numbers, which I don't know about what that is exactly, but the other thing is a principle in fluid dynamics. Yeah.
That's your engineering. There you are.
Yes. Yeah.
Fluid dynamics. Yeah, that's that family. So
Yeah.
and this is the family that his first wife comes out of.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool.
Yep. So he tells his story, of course he's writing his family still about his trip. In the spring, while Peter Kamenzind was awaiting the judgment of Samuel Fisher, and later when it was being prepared for publication, the relationship with Maria Bernoulli became steadily closer. 20 years later, after their divorce, Hesse occasionally referred to his pursuit of a marriage that at the same time he resisted, but the conflict was evident from the correspondence even then. Early in June, when the success of his book became a real possibility, Hesse's involvement grew even more intense. Yet he also argued with his friends, his father, even with his potential father-in-law, who were all concerned about the decision. In one of his letters, Hesse related how he had withdrawn from women for years and was almost a Puritan, but how he had finally acquired a girl, a delightful, petite, black-haired, wild sweetheart of a girl. Books and writing paper were gathering dust, for all of his time now belonged to his girl. There was no word about the fact that this girl was in her 30s.
Ooh.
Rather, the image he created in these letters was of a passionate little girl who reaches only up to my beard and yet can kiss so powerfully that I almost suffocate.
Is this
At
when he wrote
first,
Born to be Wild around this time?
yeah, that's what he wrote. Yeah.
Sorry.
It's good. I like that. Yeah. I'm really glad I read that poem at the beginning. I think it really frames the whole episode properly. At first, Hesse presented them only as lovers with no future commitments. Marriage, of course, is out of the question. I have no talent for that sort of thing. But he was also moved. This sweet, wild love stirs me deeply and takes me closer to the roots of life. Wisdom, art, and literature were meaningless by comparison. But the friend to whom these confessions were addressed was skeptical. Hesse had to backtrack in a later letter, and Maria ceased to be a wild thing in love. Instead, he now indicated that she was a woman equal to himself in education, experience, and intelligence. In every respect, an independent, capable person. They had been good friends for some time, while she had secretly loved him, and only recently had they become romantically involved. So people are like, whoa, 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 whoa. I don't know. What did you hear about she kisses you what?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, oh, propriety. Like,
Right.
Born to be wild, baby.
Yeah.
Gradually, however, the idea of marriage emerged more clearly. I mean, the social pressure is just staggering. In a letter to his father in June, Hesse suggested this possibility and for the first time also allowed that there would be difficulties. He found it impossible. Well, no shit. Anybody who's been married. He found it impossible to decide the matter. Hesse wrote because he was still too poor. The sales of Chemensint were to change all that. But more importantly, because he had a certain horror of marriage. Very similar to Fitzgerald. It's like, which was the novel that it was Beautiful and the Damned? Is that the one that got Fitzgerald on the map? And it was like, okay, now you can marry.
Right,
like,
right. You change your social standing, right?
Yep.
But if it doesn't become a huge hit, you're a loser.
It's even worse.
Yeah. Your social standing is falling down.
Just right through the floor.
Yeah, it's really either a home run or a strikeout. There's no nothing in between.
It's more like you twist your ankle and you're out for 10 games.
Yeah, exactly.
But more importantly, because he had a certain horror of marriage. Smart.
Yeah.
After the contract with Fisher had been signed, he became more definite. For the moment, he told his father in June his life would remain unchanged. Still secretive, he divulged that a famous publisher had given him a favorable 5-year contract, but that the extent of his independence would be determined by the volume of his sales. So they didn't just sign him for one book. It sounds like we got you we want the next 3 novels. Let's go. And you can see why on the quality of that writing. I mean, you go, wow, this is, In his letter to his skeptical friend in October, he cited his future father-in-law's objections, which showed that potential success was not quite enough, that he loved his daughter, old Fritz Bernoulli, would find quite understandable. Hesse told his correspondent, but an engagement or marriage to his daughter without Hesse's being sure of his daily bread was unacceptable. His friend, he suggested, held precisely the reverse point of view. Marriage was morally right. It was loving her that he considered sinful.
Okay.
See, that's what I'm talking about. It's like, what are you doing?
Right.
But despite objections from father-in-law and friends, they became engaged at Whitsun that year. To the objective eye, the new bride was not a fiery beauty. She was short and, though pleasingly dark-haired and possibly passionate in her love, she appeared in photographs even at relaxed moments as tense and contained. She seemed to exude an aura of suffering, even of foreboding, with her square head and her brooding eyes. Yet there was also a startled look about her, soft gestures that betrayed the musical sensibility that Hesse had first perceived in her. A famous passage in the fairy tale Iris, written to her as a farewell and dedicated to Mia, as Hesse would later call her, presents a rather clear image of what he felt about her in 1903. It was written 16 years later after 3 children and storms of illness and suffering, but the clarity distilled by the psychoanalysis of the previous years remains preciously distinct. She was older than he might have wished his wife to be. She was peculiar in her ways, and it would be difficult to live with her and at the same time to pursue one's goals. She was not very strong and healthy and enjoyed best just living among flowers and music. But sometimes she was so tender and sensitive that anything that approached her from outside pained her and caused her to weep. In this highly poetical way, Hesse tried to account for his feelings with some clarity. He ended on a painfully admiring note. Then again, she radiated light, still and fine in her solitary happiness, and whoever saw her in this way knew how difficult it would be to give anything to this strange, beautiful woman and to mean anything to her. She was not the conventional bride who often appears in Hesse's books. She was on the verge of middle age, turned into herself, yet leaning on him for support. She was almost a decade older than Hesse.
Wow.
Age gap.
Yeah.
A fact that obsessed him from the start. And their friendship turned into love precisely 1 year after his mother's death and his own failure, for which he tried to account partly in Peter Kamenzind. There were even some parallels in their appearances. Dr. Freud's in the wings here.
Yeah.
The broad face, the dark hair, the contained body, and in their love for music and flowers, they had the same name. Yeah. So
okay,
there you go. I think they would get married while her father was out of town. Like, one of those deals.
Okay.
So Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
All
Well,
right. Yeah. Yeah. So he finally married her in 1904 while her father was away for the weekend. That's not good. That's really bad. That's how to win friends and influence
yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah. Oh,
Mm.
wait, maybe he won't notice when he gets back. I don't know.
Gonna make Thanksgiving's real awkward.
Yeah, for real.
Swiss Thanksgiving, which they celebrate in July. It's a little known fact.
Yep.
Boy. So they settled down in Gaienhofen on Lake Constance. Uh, let's find out where Lake Constance is. It's three bodies of water on the Rhine at the northern foot of the Alps. Uh,
I
yeah,
bet it's pretty there.
I think I've been to this region. The lake is
Oh yeah.
situated where Germany, Switzerland, and Austria meet. Its
Okay.
shorelines lie in the German states of Baden-Württemberg and Bavaria, the Swiss cantons of St. Gallen, Thurgau, and Schaffhausen, and the Austrian state of Vorarlberg. The actual location of the border is disputed.
Ooh,
Ooh,
even
that's
still?
apparently it probably
Oh
has something to
man.
do with like where in the water, like where in the
Right.
water. It's like you could be.
World War III gonna heating
Oh,
up.
yeah, wouldn't that be great if it wasn't Taiwan? It was like over Lake Constance. Some fishermen take some dynamite out. That'd be wonderful. That'd be so good. It's just north of Liechtenstein.
Yes.
Yeah, which you can like bicycle through.
Yeah.
And rocks. That's a
Yeah.
real country. That country has borders.
Yeah, that's right.
When we're finding out right now that
Yeah.
Austria, Germany, and Switzerland, they don't know where their borders
They're
are
not
either.
sure, but Liechtenstein,
They're
everybody knows. Yeah.
they're just like us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about Liechtenstein is like one guy at like on a high rooftop can patrol the entire border.
One excellent sniper.
Yeah, just on a high, like on top of a, on top of a water
Yep.
tower or something. He can
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. This is good. You're learning geography on Art of Darkness. You're learning politics on Art
Yeah.
of Darkness. You're
Yeah.
learning how to treat your mother
Yeah.
for the love of God. Um, so yeah, and he begins a family, and this is when he has his three sons. So he had, and I'm just going to go over it real quick. Bruno Hesse was born in 1905. Heine Hesse was born in 1909, and Martin Hesse would be born in 1911.
Okay.
And Maria, at least according to the Wikipedia, was schizophrenic.
Oh,
She was mentally unwell. So there's a lot of like there's tension in the relationship from jump. And Hesse would need his independence his entire life. I mean, this is the guy who wrote Steppenwolf. Now he's married, with money, living on Lake Constance to the daughter of like a famous like mathematical family. She's mentally ill, but they're having kids.
right.
It's
Yeah.
just, oof,
Yeah.
we're juggling, we're spinning plates here now for sure.
Mhm.
And what's he going to do to follow up on Peter Kamenzind? In Gaienhofen, he writes Beneath the Wheel, which was published in 1906. Are you familiar with Beneath the Wheel, Brad?
I read it, but it's been probably 20 years. I couldn't tell you a whole lot about it. Yeah.
Do I have? I'm looking to see. Oh no, it's the Journey to the East that I have. So let me pull up a PDF of Beneath the Wheel here real quick. This is the one that is about the education system.
Okay.
So let me just read a page or two here. Make sure I can. Herr Joseph Giebenrath, jobber and middleman, possessed no laudable or peculiar traits distinguishing him from his fellow townsmen. Like the majority, he was endowed with a sturdy and healthy body, a knack for business, and an unabashed, heartfelt veneration of money. Not to mention a small house and garden, a family plot in the cemetery, a more or less enlightened, if threadbare, attachment to the church, an appropriate respect for God and the authorities, and blind submission to the inflexible laws of bourgeois respectability. Though no teetotaler, he never drank to excess. Though engaged in more than one questionable deal, he never transgressed the limits of what was legally permitted. He despised those poorer than himself as have-nots, and those wealthier as show-offs. He belonged to the Chamber of Commerce, and every Friday went bowling at the Eagle. He smoked only cheap cigars, reserving a better brand for after dinner and Sundays. In every respect, his inner life was that of a Philistine. The sensitive side of his personality had long since corroded and now consisted of little more than a traditional rough and ready family sense, pride in his only son, and an occasional charitable impulse toward the poor. His intellectual gifts were limited to an inborn canniness and dexterity with figures. His reading was confined to the newspapers, and his need for amusement was assuaged by the amateur theatricals the Chamber of Commerce put on each year and an occasional visit to the circus. He could have exchanged his name and address with any of his neighbors, and nothing would have been different. In common with every other paterfamilias in town, and deeply ingrained in his soul, he also had this deep-seated distrust of any power or person superior to himself, and animosity toward anyone who is either extraordinary or more gifted, sensitive, or intelligent than he. Enough of him. It would require a profound satirist to represent the shallowness and unconscious tragedy of this man's life. But he had a son, and there's more to be said about him.
All right. That's a good hook. Yeah.
That's a book I want to read.
Yeah. And you can see the a lot of these things were probably the same sorts of things he was seeing and feeling and recognizing during his youthful kind of freak out, right? But now he's refined it, and he's able to articulate it, and he's pointing it in a direction to, maybe say something more useful or more profound or something, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm going to read from the Wikipedia here. Beneath the Wheel is the story of Hans Giebenrath, a talented boy sent to a seminary in Maulbronn. His education is focused completely on increasing his knowledge and neglects personal development. His close friendship with Hermann Hallner, a more liberal fellow student, is a source of comfort for Hans. Hallner is expelled from the seminary, and Giebenrath is sent home after his academic performance decreases in tandem with the onset of symptoms of mental illness. Okay, well, we're reading the bio. Like, where's this coming from, right?
Right.
Back home, he finds coping with his situation difficult, having lost most of his childhood to scholastic study, and thus having never formed lasting personal relationships with anyone in his village. He is apprenticed as a mechanic and seems to find satisfaction in the work. It's visceral and concrete as opposed to the intellectual abstraction of his scholarly pursuits. Despite some personal fulfillment in his existence, Hans never fully adjusts to his new situation. On a pub crawl in a neighboring village, he and his colleagues get drunk. Giebenrath leaves the group to walk home early. Later, he is found to have drowned in a river.
Oh, I think this is a smiley face killer book.
What does that mean? No, tell me.
Oh, well, anyway, there's a sort of, I guess, quasi conspiracy theory that a bunch of college age men have been killed, and it's been made to look like drowning in Austin and Chicago and other places.
Oh, that's the smiley face killer.
Smiley face killer.
Okay.
Anyway.
All right. Well,
anyway, sorry.
no, that could have been me, man. I took a few drunken walks down by Lake Austin.
Yeah. That's where some of them have been found. And it's like, he drowned in 2 feet of water. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I took some moonlight walks back down that way. I had to whip my phone out and turn my flashlight on. And I was at least I was walking and not behind the wheel. I was not beneath the wheel. I was not behind the wheel. I was walking home from downtown after a show. Yeah, we had some times. Yeah, we had our student days. Yeah, we had a few pops back in the day. This is just a random references in other media. The crossover thrash band DRI's 1989 album Thrash Zone references Beneath the Wheel on the song Beneath the Wheel.
Ah, yeah. Awesome. Hell yeah.
Yeah, hell yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Rocks.
I'm gonna put that on after this. Thrash Zone. That's a
yeah, that
title for
rocks.
an album.
Where every episode of Art of Darkness is the Thrash Zone. All right. Yeah, in the following time, and I can't really I don't really recall how successful this was, but I get the impression that it did fine, and he was pleased with it. In the following period, he composed primarily short stories and poems. His story, The Wolf, which he wrote in 1906 to 07, was probably a foreshadowing of Steppenwolf. His next novel, Gertrude, published in 1910, kind of came out during a production crisis. He had writer's block, and he later described it as a miscarriage. I'm not going to read from it because he said that.
Yeah.
But I'm going to just quickly describe the plot. Styled as the memoir of a famous composer named Kuhn, Gertrude tells of his childhood and young adult years before it comes to the heart of the story, his relationship to two troubled artists, the eponymous Gertrude Imthor and the opera singer Heinrich Maut. Kuhn is drawn to Gertrude upon their first encounter, but she falls in love and marries Maut, whom the composer befriended as well some years before. The two are hopelessly ill-matched, and their destructive relationship provides the basis for Kuhn's magnum opus. Like many of Hesse's novels, there's a strong influence from Nietzsche, particularly The Birth of Tragedy. Maut represents the passionate Dionysian element of art, while Gertrude represents the more refined Apollonian elements. Okay. The fact that Kuhn's opera is the result of their relationship suggests the combining of the two elements to form a work of high art, presaging the ideas in the Glass Bead Game.
Yeah.
So sounds like it's maybe symbolic, but in any case. Geienhofen was the place where Hesse's interest in Buddhism was re-sparked following a letter to Kopf in 1895 entitled Nirvana. Hesse had ceased alluding to Buddhist references in his work. In 1904, however, Arthur Schopenhauer, who we're covering in season 4, and his philosophical ideas started receiving attention again. It's so funny. There's like some Presbyterian church that I drive by on the way to get here, and they have a sign, and there's always something new on the sign, and it'll be a flag of some kind, and then it'll be something else. And today they had a quote from Arthur Schopenhauer. I'm like, okay. All right. Interesting. But stop and read that. So he took an interest in Schopenhauer again, and he discovered theosophy.
Ah, yes.
Hesse. What is theosophy, Brad, for those who don't know?
I mean, I don't know if Madame Blavatsky started it exactly, but I mean, it's a what would be the easiest way? It's a sort of a school of thought that intermingles occult and esoteric ideas and practices, and to be uncharitable would say tries to pass that off as some kind of rigorous school of philosophy. To be more charitable would be to say it's an effort to integrate that sort of material into more sort of everyday thought and practices.
All right. Yeah. It's sort of woo-woo mysticism.
Yeah, it is. It's still around.
Sure.
There's still schools and reading rooms and stuff. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, as we say in the Telegram, you can take the ideas, just never go to the meetings.
Right. Well, yeah, I think there's a lot. I mean, I don't know. I'm always drawn to the esoteric occult stuff. And so there's plenty of stuff within theosophy that interests me.
Well, and I want to read a little from the bio on the occasion of his son's birth, just to give a sense of this period, his first son. And this is actually from Gertrude. So why don't I read a little bit of this so we can get a taste of that novel too. This chapter is called The Idol Unraveled. And sometimes when the black depths are silent, we can do even more. We can then be gods for moments, stretch out a commanding hand and create things which were not there before and which, when they are created, continue to live without us. Out of sounds, words, and other frail and worthless things, we can construct playthings, songs and poems full of meaning, consolation, and goodness, more beautiful and enduring than the grim sport of fortune and destiny. And that's from Gertrude.
Okay.
Bruno Hesse, born in December of 1905, ushered in a new era in his father's life. The cage seemed shut, at least for a while, and Hesse knew it. Still, at first, the child's presence neither smoothed nor sharpened his conflicts. Illness, however, remained a symbolic theme for Hesse, the counterpoint of normalcy, the figurative mole that dug beneath the well-kept gardens of his life. It undermined his settled routine, yet paradoxically opened gates to freedom. His eyes hurt in January, while Maria had a bad tooth problem. At the same time, he was by no means inactive. In March, after working hard on several stories, he spent a few weeks in northern Italy drinking wine and climbing several steep mountainsides. In April, he attended Adele's wedding, his sister. Maria had to remain home with the baby, which he took as an occasion for a more extensive trip through his native Swabia and then to Munich in May. Hesse's growing connection with several writers and artists in Munich, and especially his increased involvement with editors and contributors of the humor magazine Simplicissimus, opened up important new dimensions in his professional life. This satiric periodical, while sometimes saucy and occasionally even gamey, it said, "Well, oh, wait, listen, not on this fucking podcast. We're not having gamey on Art of Darkness." Its editor, the writer Ludwig Thoma, once had to spend 6 weeks in prison for obscenity. Based.
Oh. What does obscenity even mean back then? It's
right. Like, I just don't know. Yeah. That he caressed her ankle and tickled her toes. He danced through her tulips. I mean, like, yeah. Ooh. But it was part of the literary establishment, and it was an honor to be drawn into its circle of contributors. For many years, until and beyond the outbreak of the First World War, he remained a frequent contributor. In the spring of that year, 1906, between his trips to Swabia and Munich, Hesse received a visit from Ludwig Thoma with the proposition that he join a new biweekly periodical to be called South Germany. Combing the region around Lake Constance, Thoma picked up a number of successful literary people, and on and on. Hesse's way of dealing with the palpable constraints of a new son as well as a wife was to use his family as a base from which to move. He retained his subterranean freedom as much as possible, often using his greater income to function for wife and child in his place. She's throwing money at him.
Yeah.
In June, he was back in Bavaria while he sent them and their maid to Maria's relatives in Switzerland. They got a maid. He had intended to stop in Munich to see his business friends at his eye doctor, but he abandoned the idea when he found his publisher ill and the hotels crowded. Instead, he spent 3 relaxed weeks with a friend, the painter Theodor Rummelin, and his wife, who made a living building canals in the village of Wartenberg. A little later, toward the end of his stay, he returned to Munich after all and had a very good time with his friends from the gamey magazine, especially the brothers Paul and Reinhold Gahib, with whom he began a lifelong friendship. He had a lot of friends. He was like I said, at the end of his life, he gets to a point of 150 pages of correspondence. Yeah. He also saw painter friends and So he's just like right at the heart of European intellectual life at this period.
Wow.
So good. I just wanted to kind of give a little taste of like where he's at this point in his life. And like,
I mean, he's made it at a certain level, especially you could see the fact that at one point he's like destined to spend his life in an asylum or something, right?
He's a long way from that. Long way from that. Here's a picture of him in 1911.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
A little bit like Tarkovsky in that picture, a little bit.
Yeah, a little more dignified. Yeah. You want to see the picture? It'll be on YouTube. Let's see here. So I've got a little more from the bio. We're making good time. We'll get through it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So, one second. Side by side with uncritical praise, he found more, and this is about Gertrude, he found more and more instances where the press took revenge for its own exaggerated praise of the past. So he was overhyped. It has touted an author as a genius for so long that it has become tired of it and now declares him to be a cretin. Although Gertrude was up to then Hesse's most mature work, the negative comments left him no rest. At the same time, this man who above all wanted to be loved began to receive hate letters from his readers, threats and denunciations, mostly for his political associations. This was a burden he was to bear for the rest of his life, but at this time he still dismissed it as the other side of fame. Um, Let me see here. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Yeah, we'll get there. So the reviews for Gertrude are bad, and like politically, like we're careening toward World War One, and Hesse would very famously sort of like, well, we'll come to it. Before these events had darkened the year, Hesse had again gone to Italy, his second home. Writing from Mantua in October, he told his sister wistfully that he now experienced summer for the first time that year. I must show you a piece of Italy sometime. He enjoyed the sunshine and long walks in the country, but the poor reception of Gertrude cast these moments of relief into darkness. When he returned, plunging from the Italian sun into the German winter, his depression was fed by the criticism he encountered. His gloom even extended to Merz, whose editor he called dry and lifeless in a long letter to Ludwig Thoma. Their political writers lacked vitality, he thought. Even his friend, because he's writing for different journals and periodicals. Even his friend and attorney Konrad Hausmann, who was a frequent contributor, and he dredged up names to provide livelier alternatives. A shrewd expert on Russia and East Asia was needed, for example, and others should be drawn in, he advised. All these carpings and complaints about poor reviews were, as usual, both symptoms and causes of a new depression. At Christmas of 1910, Hesse wrote his younger sister, Marula, the condition of deep depression, of alienation, and lack of self-confidence had become so well known to me over the past few years that I would prefer just about anything, even pain. It seemed that nothing could forestall the threat of an oncoming crisis. Not his new house, his children, his often neglected but much-loved garden, his friends, his walking tours in Italy, nor even his writing, lecturing, and diverse journalistic tasks. Instead, Hesse attempted to deal with it by taking a trip to his spiritual home of his parents and grandparents, which he had planned for over a year. He went to India.
Ah, all right.
Right. Yeah. So, let me see. Here's just a little letter. I would give my left hand if I could again be a poor, happy bachelor and own nothing but 20 books, a second pair of boots, and a box full of secretly composed poems. Now, however, I am a family father, homeowner, and only two favorite author. And since I have little talent for and confidence in pathos, I try to accept this lightly and perhaps become, after a while, a fair humorist. Hesse's wandering during the year of his third child's birth, his profound restlessness culminating in a long voyage abroad at the very time of Mia's pregnancy, was clearly part of his profound problem and style. His correspondence of that summer of his 34th birthday reveals his partial awareness of that duality. Responding to his lawyer a week after his birthday in July, he wrote, "My wife expects a baby at the end of the month, and if all goes well, I shall disappear from this region and will be beyond reach." I'm getting ready for our third. It'll be my fourth. Like, I'm not going to India, bro.
Right.
I would have to disappear forever.
You might not be welcome back. Yeah. Yeah.
But Hesse somehow pulling it off, and or not pulling it off. It's tense. It's not good. But he does take this trip to India. So during this time, obviously, there's more tension between him and Maria. In 1911, he leaves for a long trip to Sri Lanka and Indonesia. He also visited Sumatra, Borneo, and Burma. But apparently, the physical experience of it depressed him. If we think about India, maybe people will say it's squalorous in places. I mean, no disrespect, but people from America will come back and go, just the thing that blows their minds is the degree of poverty. To a degree that we don't grok. Now we have to imagine that 110 years ago, what this guy from fucking Basel living in like literally the nicest part of the world, the most beautiful part of the world, going back and forth between like Basel and Italy and this lake. Now he's in
Yeah.
India. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. That's
he
quite a transition.
he got
Yeah.
the ick, I think. Um,
But he
yeah,
went,
and
he saw it, he saw the
he went,
world.
he saw
Yeah.
it. Yep, yep. Any spiritual or religious inspiration that he was looking for eluded him, but the journey made a strong impression on his work. Following his return, the family moved to Bern in Switzerland. But the change of environment did not help their marriage, and he confessed that in his novel Roshalda from 1914.
Oh, I've never
And of
heard of
course,
this one.
because he's in, you haven't heard of Roshalda? Okay,
No.
all right. Well, I've got it right here.
Ooh.
How convenient. Um, I mean, and we're right in the thick of World War One, or it's coming. It's the outbreak is coming. Um, all right, so let me read from the beginning of this novel. Are you enjoying the readings from
Yeah,
the
yeah,
novels,
yeah. No,
Brad? Okay.
these are a good way to get us
Yeah.
sink a little hook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in the fourth hour of this episode. I swear, I don't think we're going to go 7 hours, so we'll be
Okay.
fine. I'm going to get
Okay.
us there.
Okay.
I hope everybody's enjoying this, and I want to say thank you again to everybody, and thank you for a great year. Like this is a breakout year for us. It was a
Oh yeah.
real treat to do season 3. I've really had fun. The live show was so fun. I can't
Hmm.
wait to do another one, and hopefully,
Hmm.
like we can keep growing the show 3, 5, 7 years, and we'll do like a tour. We'll do 10
Yeah.
cities, dude. That would be so
We'll go to
cool.
Bern. We'll go to Swabia. We'll go to
I would go to
Burma.
Bern. I've been to Bern. Bern's a
Have you?
beautiful city. Switzerland's
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I've been to Bern, Basel, Zurich. I mean, Switzerland's not that large, and
Right.
the trains run on time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they really do. All right, so this is from Russ Hulda. 10 years ago, when Johann Veraguth bought Rushalda and moved in, it was an abandoned old manor with overgrown garden paths, moss-covered benches, cracked stone steps, and a tangled, neglected park. The only buildings on the property, which measured about 8 acres, were the fine, slightly run-down manor house with its stable, and in the park a small temple-like summer house, its door hanging askew on bent hinges, and its walls formerly hung with blue silk covered with moss and mold. Immediately after purchasing the house, the new owner had torn down the decrepit temple, leaving only the 10 old stone steps that descended from its threshold to the edge of the fish pond. In its place, Veraguth's studio was built. Here, for 7 years, he had painted and spent most of his time, but he had lived at the manor house until the increasing dissension in his family had led him to send his elder son away to boarding school, to leave the manor house to his wife and servants, and for his own use to add 2 rooms to the studio, where he had been living as a bachelor ever since.
Hmm.
It was a pity about the fine manor house. Frau Farraguth and the 7-year-old Pierre used only the upper floor. She received visitors and guests, but never very many of them, so that a number of the rooms were empty all year round. And then it goes on a little bit. Little Pierre was the darling of both parents, the only bond between father and mother. Not only did he maintain a certain contact between the manor and the studio, in a sense, he was the sole lord and master of Rushalda. How much heartache is in that page and a half
Yeah. Yeah.
as he's careening toward divorce with his mentally ill wife?
Right. Yeah. Pain. Huh.
And so this is, you're talking about how he could have been a rapper. I mean, this is a guy, he's a great poet, a great novelist, has it all. He's like, I wish I could be back in my room at school with 20 books in my shoes, and that's it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can sympathize with that at times, at least. Right? Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's a lot of responsibility to have a family, to be a
Hmm.
homeowner.
Hmm.
Yeah. Mo money, mo problems, I think is
Yeah.
what they say in
Yeah.
the vernacular,
Yeah.
in the parlance of
Hard
our
times.
times.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're First World War.
Oh,
Uh
that's a big war.
that's the big one. That is a big war. I mean, and just real quickly, Rusalda deals with the failed marriage of the protagonist. And how intense is that? I mean,
Mm.
he's just confessing his own
Yeah.
failed marriage.
Yeah, and you
Ooh.
wonder too. I wonder when we come across this. I mean, when it comes out, he's still married. You do wonder sometimes, does his wife read it? What does she think of it? Like, is she telling herself it's all just fiction and made up? It's interesting, right? When someone writes something that confessional about literally the situation they're in, it's yeah. You know?
Yeah, I got this play coming out about podcasters.
Oh boy.
No, it's totally. I actually do. I actually co-wrote like a comedy. Yeah, but it's unrelated to our
Yeah.
situation.
Right.
Mostly unrelated.
But there's a character who looks exactly like you, Brad.
right. The homely and awkward Bruce was the co-host of the podcast next to the glowing and erotically charged Calvin with the finest hair in Christendom. Oh, that play is going to be terrible. All right. During the First World War. At the outbreak of the First World War in 1914, Hesse registered himself as a volunteer with the Imperial Army, saying that he could not sit inactively by a warm fireplace while other young authors were dying on the front. He was found unfit for combat duty, but was assigned to service involving the care of prisoners of war. While most poets and authors of the warring countries quickly became embroiled in a tirade of mutual hate, Hesse, seemingly immune to the general war enthusiasm of the time, wrote an essay titled "O Friends, Not These Tones," "O Freunde, nicht diese Töne." And that comes from Schiller and from Beethoven's Ninth, I believe. Well, he was destined to be he was Swiss through and through. I mean, I can't remember when he gets his citizenship, but he belonged in that country, which is a real country with real borders. By the way. Yeah. It's so
he would have been 37 when I'm just thinking 37 volunteering to, I'm sure he didn't have to do that.
Yep. Yeah. We don't want Hermann Hesse being, garroted to death in a trench on the front. Right. Like, I mean, leave that to the 18-year-olds, as horrific as that is. Anyway, it was published in the Neue Zürcher Zeitung on the 3rd of November, a newspaper. In this essay, he appealed to his fellow intellectuals not to fall for nationalistic madness and hatred. Calling for subdued voices in recognition of Europe's common heritage, no more brother wars, Hesse wrote that love is greater than hate, understanding greater than ire, peace nobler than war. This exactly is what this unholy world war should burn into our memories, more so than ever felt before.
Okay.
He wasn't wrong.
No, man.
He was right.
Yeah.
All right. So
especially that's like a war that like doesn't even make sense. Literally, like in 100 years from now, people will have no ability to even understand what that war was. Like what it was about.
People has no idea. Even people they have no clue now.
Right.
They didn't know then. They don't know now.
Yeah.
Then came the summer of 1914, and suddenly everything looked different inwardly and outwardly. It became evident that our former well-being had rested on insecure foundations. And accordingly, there now began a period of misery, the great education. The so-called time of testing had come, and I cannot say that it found me better prepared, worthier or superior to anyone else. What distinguished me from others at that time was only that I lacked the great compensation so many others possessed, enthusiasm. Then we see a more mature Hesse here. He's discovered modesty a little bit, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
You can hear it. At the age of 37, an artist who loved peace, yet who was deeply concerned about his role as a citizen and writer, Hesse found that the war subjected his indecisiveness to its severest test. His repugnance at the slaughter was genuine. He emphasized his lack of enthusiasm and described with ironic contempt how the life of an enthusiastic old lady had been given meaning by the war, caring for the wounded. But he also applied to the German embassy as a volunteer, only to be told to wait for his age group to be called to the colors. He did not then place himself beyond the pale of the German establishment, as real anti-war refugees like Leonard Frank or his close friend of the 1920s, Hugo Ball, had done, who were then gathering in Zurich and Bern. Rather, Hesse took both steps at once, denouncing the war with one stroke of his pen and supporting it, however reluctantly, with the other. As he had done when he was a schoolboy, he made a point of his subversive convictions, but at the same time, he wanted to be accepted by those in authority, whether they were his parents or school or the government. There was always the misdeed and the need for forgiveness for the saving goodnight kiss. His first gesture, mild perhaps, but outspoken in the atmosphere of the war hysteria, was taken in a brief Fullerton piece published in that newspaper. And then, it goes on. And it's saying was actually a rather diffident complaint addressed to journalists on both sides of the war. So he addressed this to the journalists saying, hey, chill out. The title was taken from Schiller's Ode to Joy, which forms the final chorus of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, but the message was an appeal to all scribblers to mute their voices. Hesse asked them to continue the obvious bond that transcends belligerency, a common humanity formed by Shakespeare, French poetry, and German music. The sentiment was not only mild and diffidently expressed, it was also non-activist, indeed non-political. For whatever pacifist sentiments were voiced, were channeled into comments about literature and art. And yet the reaction, especially in Germany, was surprisingly strong. Newspapers were indignant, and old friends, as Hesse said wryly in an essay, decided that they had nurtured a viper in their breasts. He was deluged with angry, anonymous letters, an experience that was then relatively new to him, but which was to repeat itself in ever-increasing volume for the rest of his life.
Wow.
So
don't you tell me to calm down.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not going to quote Schiller at me while we're at war with these fucking frogs.
Right.
We gotta send our boys to the front and we're going to win this son of a bitch. Why are we fighting? I don't fucking know, but we're going to the front for the honor of the fatherland.
Right. And we don't need your malingering hippy dippy crap.
Yeah. Exactly. We're going to kill an entire generation of Europeans.
Yeah. Well, right.
Woo!
Right. Well, these kinds of conflicts, it is interesting, and we've managed to see some in our lives. Nothing quite at the scale of the Great War, but there is always this like rabble, like really turning the other side into like an enemy. Like they're different kinds of humans than we are. And then there's always people who are like, whoa, 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 whoa. And everybody's always like, well, this time it's different. It's and then in retrospect, it's like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have treated like everybody living in that country as though they were some kind of different species of human. Maybe that wasn't the move.
Probably not the move.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ah, no fun.
Yeah.
All right. What followed from this was a great turning point in his life. For the first time, he found himself in the middle of a serious political conflict, attacked by the German press, the recipient of hate mail, and distanced from old friends. He did receive support from certain other friends, and they visited him, but Hesse would eventually write to one of them, the attempt to apply love to matters political has failed. Nobody was stopping that war. That
sounds like a quick summary of the 20th century.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I have a whole awful lot here. Here, this is important. So now something else happens. And this is in Bern in March of 1916. Dear Herr Dr. Achernacht. German's such a beautiful language. Your package with grammars and dictionaries were waiting for me upon my return. My very best thanks. My father's sudden death, overwork for some time, a bad cold, the arduous trip back across the frontier made me feel very run down, so that I have worries. Not only does he have to deal with World War I and all this hate mail, his father dies. The crisis had come unexpectedly. In March 1916, Hermann Hesse was standing on a station platform in Basel. As he told it in his brief memoir, In Remembrance, Hesse was about to get on a train when a friend approached him and asked him not to leave. For a moment, Hesse was puzzled and demurred, but the friend put his arm around his shoulder and led him back into the station. He had just received a wire from Mia in Bern, which Hermann had left just that morning, asking him to intercept her husband before he took the train to Zurich. The telegram announcing that Johannes Hesse had died had arrived at Hesse's home shortly after he had left. Numb, Hesse thought only of the details to be taken care of before he could get back to Württemberg inside the country at war. He had to go back to Bern quickly to transact the necessary formalities for a renewed border crossing. Did he have an adequate black suit? When was the next train he could take? But in the midst of these mechanical thoughts, while he was already in the train that was taking him back to Bern, his thoughts groped toward an awareness that Hesse never caught in an image, that Hesse later caught in an image. Now and then, a half-awakened consciousness of my loss rose oppressively and took my breath away and hurt inside my head, behind my eyes. Then I tried to pull myself together and with intense concentration sought to reproduce a picture of the deceased within myself. But it never appeared bright and true. The only good feeling that breathed within me for moments with any purity and consolation was this: he is well off. He has his rest. He is where he longed to be. Then I recalled times when I had known my father ill and tormented by endless pain. And suddenly I did see his picture distinctly, too sharply, with his dear moving, pain-filled gestures, as breathing deeply he pushed his long hair from his temples while his eyes rested upon me still and sadly, as if coming from foreign shores. And now I sensed again, at least, his being within me, purely and distinctly, and I said to myself, they have never understood him, nobody. Not even all his friends. Only I understand him fully, for I am just like him, alone and understood by no one.
Mm.
And then he would go to his father's funeral, and this is what he wrote. When weeping, I kissed his hands and placed my own hands warm with life upon his stony forehead. I remembered how in my boyhood days, when one of us came home with cold hands in the winter, he used to ask us to lay our hands on his forehead just a little, for he was often afflicted with severe headaches that lasted for days. Now my restless, warm hands were placed on his forehead, seeking coolness from him. And all that was chivalrous and all that was superior and noble in his being was written in his face with exaggerated clarity and dignified like a silent, snow-capped mountain. Oh, Father, Father. Yeah. One more little bit. Whosoever has set out on the road to maturity cannot lose, only gain, until some time for him too the hour will come and he will find the cage open, and with a last pounding of the heart will leave the land of the inadequate. If one of our kind would search in the Bible and other books for a good proverb and slogan that says all and wants to say all, but that will still catch its most gracious glow in the mirror, such a one would find no better proverb anywhere than the verse of the psalm, the rope is torn, the bird is free. So I think he's, and he's heading toward a crisis of nerves. Right. I mean, he's getting, his father's dead. He's getting hate mail. And I think we're coming up to a period where he would spend, a great deal of time in these various spas and things. Yeah. So we're going to keep on moving. I swear we're gonna make good time here, Brad. How are you doing? You holding it together?
Yeah. No, this is great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me just
actually,
take
I might take a little
water.
A quick restroom break.
Yeah, take a little restroom break, Brad.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna I'll vamp a little bit and talk about what I've got coming up. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. I hope you're having a good time. Just a reminder, again, we have a Telegram. The Telegram is a chat room. The chat room is at t.me/artofdarkpod. If you want to impress everybody with your knowledge of the show, jump in there and post a picture of a fancy pen. People love pens in that chat. And you can about imagine what 170 plus people in an Art of Darkness chat room get on about. People are posting links. They're sharing links to other shows. They're sharing links to pieces of art. I'm always sharing stuff from Twitter. Yeah, it's a good time. We try to have fun. We try to keep it on topic. We talk about art, creativity, the nature of creativity, and the topics that we've covered. I'm going to really, really push to do John Lennon next. That's a big episode. There's a lot to think about there. So we'll see how I do. I got to prepare that, and then I have to do Fitzgerald Part 2. I think we already mentioned that we're going to do the live show in Detroit next year, sometime in the fall. Houdini. I think Brad has some fun stuff lined up. I really like the idea when we do Art of Darkness live to, if we can, always pair it with, like, I don't want to say an opener, but like another act that does something that's relevant to the topic we're covering. So what kind of an act would we get to do Houdini with us, right? Obviously somebody who paints live, right? No. So, we'll figure it out. It should be fun. It's been a great year. Merry Christmas to everyone who celebrates. Christmas isn't over yet. We're still in the 12 days of Christmas. And Happy New Year to one and all around the world. The Art of Darkness listeners, we appreciate you. And you can find everything you want about the show at artofdarkpod.com. We've really enjoyed doing this. I remember when Brad and I just started the show, like as a random kind of idea during the pandemic, kind of going back and forth. What do we want to talk about? What's something that would like motivate us to continue to keep doing a show, right? We don't just want to have a vibe cast. We want to have a franchise, an idea. And I'm just really glad that we pursued it. I'm just telling people how the show began, Brad, and kind of how I'm glad that we landed on an idea that keeps us motivated. So we don't just surrender to just doing a vibe cast or just giving up, right?
I'm with you. No, we got exciting things. We got exciting things coming. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I was also telling people that for the live shows, we like the idea of always having a second act.
Yeah.
And so I told them for Houdini, obviously we're going to have somebody who plays the ukulele.
That makes the most sense.
But ukulele rhymes with Houdini,
sort of,
but not in a slant.
In a slant. Well, right. That's more sophisticated.
That's right. Yeah, we're gonna shackle a ukulele player to the stage. For
that's what the intern. The intern is
the intern is the other intern is currently learning how to properly shackle.
These are important skills. They will use these later in life.
Listen, I mean, you think an internship with this show would be, you could just phone it in, but you can't phone it in. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week in the Art of Darkness studios.
Yeah, mostly filing. Mostly filing.
A lot of filing. All right, here we are. So the public controversy was not yet resolved around the letter, what he wrote in the newspaper. His father dies. Then his son Martin has a serious illness, and Mia, her schizophrenia is more intense. He was forced to leave his military service and began receiving psychotherapy, which began for Hesse a long preoccupation with psychoanalysis, through which he came to know Carl Jung personally and was challenged to new creative heights through the psychoanalysis. I don't think Hesse is the first, and he won't be the last person who ends up in therapy after both their parents die.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And he's in middle age, and he's under a lot of pressure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
well, and his wife is schizophrenic, losing her mind. I mean, it's it's tough to deal with too.
Yeah. Hesse and Jung both later maintained a correspondence with Chilean author, diplomat, and Nazi sympathizer Miguel Serrano, who detailed his relationship with both figures in a book, C.G. Jung and Hermann Hesse, A Record of Two Friendships. Huh. Okay. Interesting. I know anything about Miguel Serrano? That's a name that I know. Ooh,
I don't. I know the three things you said.
Wow. Listen to this. Listen to this. Miguel Joaquin Diego del Carmen Serrano Fernandez, known as Miguel Serrano, born in 1917 and died in 2009, was a Chilean diplomat, writer, occultist, and fascist activist, a Nazi sympathizer in the late 30s and early 40s. He later became a prominent figure in the neo-Nazi movement as an exponent of esoteric Hitlerism.
Oh boy.
Well, that's a fun little aside. I wonder how Hesse and Jung felt about this guy.
How esoteric are we talking here? Is it like secretly Hitler was anti-Hitler thing? Or
I have no idea. I mean, there's okay. That's
a rabbit hole one could go down.
Yeah, that could be maybe a fun little mini episode for the Patreon. We'll have to think about it. In any case, during a 3-week period in September and October of 1917, Hesse penned his novel Demian. Okay, 3 weeks he writes this. You've read Demian?
I have read Demian, and I think my challenge when you asked me before about Beneath the Wheel is I think I was struggling to disentangle them from each other a little
Hmm,
bit.
fair enough.
Yeah.
This would be published following the armistice in 1919 under the pseudonym Emil Sinclair. So now we know why he would publish it under a pseudonym, given the heat that he was under. And I'm going to read the very beginning of Demian.
Mhm.
Well, let's see here. This is the preface, but I'm still going to read it. All I really wanted was to try and live the life that was spontaneously welling up within me. Why was that so very difficult? To tell my story, I have to start far in the past. If I could, I'd have to go back much further yet to the very earliest years of my childhood and even beyond them to my distant origins. When authors write novels, they usually act as if they were God and could completely survey and comprehend some person's history and present it as if God were telling it to himself, totally unveiled in its essence at all points. I can't any more than those authors can, but my story is more important to me than any author's is to him because it's my own. It's the story of a human being, not an invented potential ideal or otherwise non existent person, but a real unique living one. To be sure, people today have less of an idea than ever before what a really living person is. In fact, human beings, each one of whom is a priceless, unique experiment of nature, are being shot to death in carloads. If we weren't something more than unique individuals, if we could really be totally dispatched from the world by a bullet, it would no longer make sense to tell stories. But each person is not only himself, he is also the unique, very special point, important and noteworthy in every instance where the phenomena of the world meet, once only and never again in the same way. And so every person's story is important, eternal, divine. And so every person, to the extent that he lives and fulfills nature's will, is wondrous and deserving of full attention. In each of us, spirit has become form. In each of us, the created being suffers. In each of us, a redeemer is crucified. Not many people nowadays know what man is. Many feel it and therefore die more easily, just as I shall die more easily when I have finished writing this story. I
Wow.
have no right to call myself one who knows. I was one who seeks, and I still am. But I no longer seek in the stars or in books. I'm beginning to hear the teachings of my blood pulsing within me. My story isn't pleasant. It's not sweet and harmonious like the invented stories. It tastes of folly and bewilderment, of madness and dream, like the life of all people who no longer want to lie to themselves. Every person's life is a journey toward himself, the attempt at a journey, the intimation of a path. No person has ever been completely himself, but each one strives to become so, some gropingly, others more lucidly, according to his abilities. Each one carries with him to the end traces of his birth, the slime and eggshells of a primordial world. Many a one never becomes a human being, but remains a frog, lizard, or ant. Many a one is a human being above and a fish below, but each one is a gamble of nature, a hopeful attempt at forming a human being. We all have a common origin, the mothers. We all come out of the same abyss, but each of us, a trial, throw of the dice from the depths, strives towards his own goal. We can understand one another, but each of us can only interpret himself.
Hmm.
That's the beginning
Okay.
of Demian, or
Okay.
the preface to Demian.
Yeah. Feels Jungian, I would say. Yeah.
And when you think about it in light of the war and how passionate the writing is, I mean, it's really quite something.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Demian Emil Sinclair is a young boy raised in a middle class home amidst what is described as a Scheinwelt, a composite word meaning world of illusion.
Mhm.
So his entire existence can be summarized as a struggle between two worlds: the show world of illusion, which is related to the Hindu concept of Maya or Mara, and the real world, the world of spiritual truth, like Plato's cave. Accompanied and prompted by his mysterious classmate and friend, Max Damian, he detaches from and revolts against the superficial ideals of the world of appearances and eventually awakens into a realization of the self. And he wrote this, yeah. And then if you go to that Wikipedia, there's a whole section called Jungian influence.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So And Demian is worth rereading. Like if you've not
I
read Demian, yeah.
yeah, and some of this is coming back to me. I do remember it being quite striking.
Mm.
Yeah.
Hmm. So let's go. I'm going to read about some of the business of the reception. Remember, he released this. He was already like a household name
Mm.
in the German speaking world, and he releases it under a pseudonym right after the war, which is like,
Yeah.
that's a move.
Well, am I forgetting, and isn't there I believe, isn't there like a brief homosexual romance with the Demian character?
I
Maybe not.
can't. Boy, it's been so long since I
Yeah.
read
Maybe
it.
I could be misremembering it.
Yeah, I don't know. Somebody might have told you that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it might be like there might be undertones.
Mm,
Yeah. I mean, the novels do feature deep relationships between two men.
okay. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it could just be, yeah.
Yeah. Could be a
Yep.
bromance.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Can't men just be friends, Brad? Why do you
No,
keep
well,
pushing the issue, dude?
if they start a podcast, they can. Them's the rules.
I already told you no. All right, all right. So getting back here. Um, let me see here. Nearly 3 years later, in 1919, Demian finally appeared in print under the name of its hero, Emil Sinclair. Hesse used a pseudonym partly to make clear to himself that he had embarked on a new life, partly to dissociate himself from the war controversy in which he figured. The choice of the name had been inspired by that of Isaac von Sinclair, a friend of the German romantic poet Friedrich Hölderlin. For 1 year, the name held good. Hesse received the Fontaine Prize as the writer of a first novel. Whoops. And even luminaries like Thomas Mann, who professed great excitement when the book appeared, did not know his identity. He could find out nothing about Sinclair, Mann told a friend, for their publisher Samuel Fisher claimed only that he had received the manuscript through Hesse. He was supposed to be a young, sick poet living in Switzerland. In 19 that's a you gotta turn down that prize if you get that prize. That's a little unethical.
Yeah.
In 1920, the truth was uncovered by a journalist, Eduard Karate. In response, Hesse owned up officially in Vivus Voco, the journal he then edited with his wartime friend Ricard Volterek, and returned the prize.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Meanwhile, however, the power of Demian had taken hold, just as Thomas Mann described it in 1947 in his preface to the American edition. The electrifying influence exercised on a whole generation just after the First World War by Demian from the pen of a certain mysterious Sinclair is unforgettable. With uncanny accuracy, this poetic work struck the nerve of the times and called forth grateful rapture from a whole youthful generation who believed that an interpreter of their innermost life had risen from their own midst, whereas it was a man already 42 years old who gave them what they sought. Hesse himself was fully aware of this effect. What will come is unthinkable, he wrote about the world that Demian sought to clarify. The soul of Europe is a beast that has been chained too long. Yet deep down, something is in the process of becoming something like a new humanity. It gives me chills, man. Thinking about what's to come and that period of time and the fact that he, under a pseudonym, writes probably the most popular novel of the period.
Right.
He's done it now twice. He's broken out.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Once. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah. All right. Let's keep on keeping on here. So by the time Hesse returned to civilian life in 1919, his marriage had fallen apart. His wife had a severe episode of psychosis. Even after recovery, he saw no possible future with her. Their home in Bern was divided. Their children were accommodated in boarding houses and by relatives. And Hesse resettled alone in the middle of April in Ticino, which I believe is it's in the Italian part of Switzerland, or it is the Italian part of Switzerland. He occupied a small farmhouse, and on May 11th, he moved to the town Montagnola and rented 4 small rooms in a castle-like building which, hey, that sounds pretty nice.
Yeah.
The Kaza Kamuzi.
The his Mojo Dojo Casa house.
Kaza Kamuzi. Sounds
Right.
pretty dope. Here he explored his writing projects further. He began to paint, an activity reflected in his next major story, Klingser's Last Summer. Are you familiar with Klingser's Last
Nope.
Summer?
No.
Written over the course of a few weeks in July and August of 1919. It's crazy that he wrote Demian in 3 weeks. Like,
that's insane. Yeah.
You can do it. You really can. You really can do it. You can write like a world-changing novella in 3 to 4 weeks. And I'm not talking to you specifically. Well, Brad has his own method. No, and I'm not preaching, but like, really, I mean, if you're motivated, if you've got something to say, go and say it. Go and say it. Yeah. So it was published in like a periodical, then later in a volume with some other business. The story is an account of the final months of the life of Klingser, a 42-year-old expressionist painter. A lover of poetry, a heavy drinker, and a womanizer, he spends his final summer in southern Switzerland, torn between sensuality and spirituality, and troubled by feelings of impending death. I mean, yeah, he's going right to the depths of his plumbing the depths of his soul here. And I had to do this, so please forgive me. Entschuldigung. Manchmal handeln wir gern aus und ein, tun dies und das, und es ist alles leicht, unbeschwert und gleichsam unverbindlich. Es könnte scheinbar alles auch anders sein. Und manchmal zu anderen Stunden könnte nichts anders sein. Ist nichts unverbindlich und leicht, und jeder Atemzug, den wir tun, ist von Gewalten bestimmt und schwer von Schicksal. I just wanted to give a little bit of the original German. I don't know how well I did. I don't know. I don't know. You tell me how poor my German is. Anyway, but this is the English translation right out of, because I couldn't find this, and I don't know if I had my copy, or maybe this is one of the ones that I had. In any case, this is like right out of Google Translate. So here's the opening. Sometimes we act, go out and in, do this and that, and it's all easy, carefree, and, so to speak, non-binding. It could apparently all be different, and sometimes at other times, nothing could be different. Nothing is casual and easy, and every breath we take is determined by force and heavy with fate. Okay.
I like that.
So,
that's getting in it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right. We're coming up to some of the bangers. Right.
Mm-hmm.
We've already got it. Like, he was already written Demian.
Yeah.
He's already written Demian, but we're coming up to the big air that everybody reads. I mean, if everybody reads Hesse, what they read is Demian, Steppenwolf, SIDDHARTHA, and then maybe the Glass Speed Game.
Yeah.
I think is what people do. But there's other stuff. Like, you could be a Hesse maximalist and not waste your time.
Yeah. Clearly.
For sure.
Yeah. Clearly.
This new beginning in different surroundings brought him happiness. Oh, surprise. You get rid of your schizophrenic wife and your young children, and now you're happy. Okay. Well, no wonder he thinks of himself as like he's a little, I don't love it. Right. But yeah. Okay. Yeah. He called his first year in Ticino the fullest, most prolific, most industrious, and most passionate time of my life. In 1922, Hesse's novella SIDDHARTHA appeared. And here we are. Let me get SIDDHARTHA out. Am I beginning to make the case that you don't graduate from this guy?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't think there's somebody you put down at 23 and then never come back to. I think that there's a lot here, and hopefully I'm making the case. I'm just going to read the first few paras of SIDDHARTHA. I'm sure most of our listeners know it, but the Brahmin's son. In the shade of the house, in the sunshine on the riverbank, by the boats, in the shade of the sallow wood and the fig tree, SIDDHARTHA, the handsome Brahmin's son, grew up with his friend Govinda. The sun browned his slender shoulders on the riverbank while bathing at the holy ablutions, at the holy sacrifices. Shadows passed across his eyes in the mango grove during play, while his mother sang during his father's teachings. When, with the learned men, SIDDHARTHA had already long taken part in the learned men's conversations, had engaged in debate with Govinda, and had practiced the art of contemplation and meditation with him. Already he knew how to pronounce Om silently, this word of words, to say it inwardly with the intake of breath when breathing out, and with all his soul, his brow radiating the glow of pure spirit. Already he knew how to recognize Atman within the depth of his being, indestructible, at one with the universe. There was happiness in his father's heart because of his son, who was intelligent and thirsty for knowledge. He saw him growing up to be a great learned man, a priest, a prince among Brahmins. There was pride in his mother's breast when she saw him walking, sitting down, and rising. Siddhartha, strong, handsome, supple-limbed, greeting her with complete grace. Love stirred in the hearts of the young Brahmin's daughters when Siddhartha walked through the streets of the town with his lofty brow, his king-like eyes, and his slim figure. Govinda, his friend, the Brahmin's son, loved him more than anybody else. He loved Siddhartha's eyes and clear voice. He loved the way he walked, his complete grace of movement. He loved everything that Siddhartha did and said. And above all, he loved his intellect, his fine, ardent thoughts, his strong will, his high vocation. Govinda knew that he would not become an ordinary Brahmin, a lazy, sacrificial official, an avaricious dealer in magic sayings, a conceited, worthless orator, a wicked, sly priest, or just a good, stupid sheep amongst a large herd. No. And he, Govinda, did not want to become any of these, not a Brahmin like 10,000 others of their kind. He wanted to follow Siddhartha, the beloved, the magnificent. And if he ever became a god, if he ever entered the all-radiant, then Govinda wanted to follow him as his friend, his companion, his servant, his lance-bearer, his shadow. That's the beginning of Siddhartha.
It's great stuff. Yeah,
great stuff.
It's great.
Great stuff. Banger. And so if you haven't taken the Hesse pill yet, Siddhartha is a good place to start. My personal preference is probably Demian. I feel like Demian, just for me, but Siddhartha is where a lot of people begin. But
if I remember right, it's fairly short, maybe 120 pages.
It's a novella. Both Demian and Siddhartha are short.
Yep.
You could probably read each in a week or less. Yeah, depending on how quickly you read.
Yeah.
All right. So there's I'm probably going to blast past this, but just let me just say there's a second marriage, but it only lasts like a couple of months. It's like a civil ceremony, and it's just like boom, boom. In the interest of time, I want to sort of, in 1924, Hesse married the singer Ruth Wenger, the daughter of the Swiss writer Lisa Wenger and aunt of Marie Oppenheim. I've got pages. I'm going to leave it. And Wikipedia is so funny. It's like, the marriage never attained any stability, however.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Just, I'll have one marriage, please. And that doesn't, it's like a fast food. It was like
with a stick a couple times. It didn't work. I don't know.
I mean, I think it was a case of like, they may have already been, or, and it's like, we should, but no. And weird. And it was like a civil ceremony. And he even talked about just the display of it. It was not a great time. And we are going to come up to, here we are. In 1923, Hesse was granted Swiss citizenship. His next major work, Kurgest and the Nuremberg Trip, were autobiographical narratives with ironic undertones and foreshadowed his next novel. What do you think is coming up next, Brad? After Siddhartha. Boom, you got it. Yeah, because we were born to be wild. Let's go. Head on the highway. That's a banger, dude.
Yeah,
I'm gonna listen. Yeah. I'm gonna listen to that between this and the After Dark. I'm slapping that sucker on, dude. Yeah. I mean, in Steppenwolf, I already read from the very beginning of it. I'm just gonna read now from the Steppenwolf's part of the book. This is just the first paragraph or two of the chapter called "For Madmen Only." And this is going to make so much more sense now that you know the biography and where he is in life. It's a busted family, weird second marriage. Kids are kind of in boarding schools, and he's like presumably living alone, maybe drinking too much. He's accepting his destiny as like a madman, for madmen only.
Right.
The day had gone by just as days go by. I had killed it in accordance with my primitive and retiring way of life. I had worked for an hour or two and perused the pages of old books. I had had pains for 2 hours, as elderly people do. I had taken a powder and been very glad when the pains consented to disappear. I had lain in a hot bath and absorbed its kindly warmth. 3 times the mail had come with undesired letters and circulars to look through. I had done my breathing exercises, but found it convenient today to omit the thought exercises. I had been for an hour's walk and seen the loveliest feathery cloud patterns penciled against the sky. That was very delightful. So was the reading of the old books. So was the lying in the warm bath. But taken all in all, it had not been exactly a day of rapture. No, it had not even been a day brightened with happiness and joy. Rather, it had been just one of those days for which a long while now had fallen to my lot, the moderately pleasant, the wholly bearable and tolerable, lukewarm days of a discontented middle-aged man, days without special pains, without special cares, without particular worries, without despair, days when I calmly wonder, objective and fearless, whether it isn't time to follow the example of Adalbert Stifter and have an accident while shaving. And that's how that starts.
I like it. I like it.
Maybe I should slit my own throat.
Yeah, exactly. I don't remember it being quite that dark, but yeah. All right.
That's how it starts. And we're all past this guy, right? We're all just going to read this guy in college and then move on now.
Right.
He has a lot to tell. He has a lot to say. So yeah, I got to reread that, man. That's a banger.
Yeah, I remember liking that book quite a lot. Yeah.
And Steppenwolf, I mean, it describes the life of this odd duck, middle-aged guy.
But it takes this crazy turn when the Magic Theater segment starts. It's like gets full-blown psychedelic. Like it's
Right. And one of the things we're going to talk about in the influences, there's a major theater in San Francisco called the Magic Theater that premiered a bunch of Sam Shepard stuff. It's still there. Very famous theater named after that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Here's a little bit about it. In 1924, Hesse married singer Ruth Wenger. After several weeks, however, he left Basel, only returning near the end of the year.
He does have a habit of like, I don't like this. I'm going to go over there. Yeah.
Yeah. Based. I mean, and he's doing this all by train too. Like in America, he'd be in a car.
Headed on the highway.
Looking for adventure. Yeah, exactly, dude. Yeah, now you get it. Now you understand.
I am. It's all coming together.
Yeah, so that one is definitely worth reading. That's a good one. There's I've got a little bit of the critical reception. I mean, he talks about taking a powder. I mean, was he doing cocaine? Probably was describing cocaine.
Probably.
Close friends and longtime readers of Hesse criticized the novel for its perceived lack of morality and its open depiction of sex and drug use, a criticism that indeed remained the primary rebuff of the novel for many years. He's ahead of his time.
Rock and roll,
rock and roll, baby.
Yeah.
American novelist Jack Kerouac dismissed it in Big Sur, though popular interest was renewed in the 1960s. Kerouac has nothing to say. Kerouac can shut his mouth, to be honest. Kerouac isn't remotely nearly anywhere near the level of Hesse, in my opinion. And I'll just go on the record and say that.
Fair enough.
Yeah, no. I mean, no. Popular interest was renewed in the 1960s, specifically in the psychedelic movement, primarily because it was seen as a counterculture book and because of its depiction of free love and explicit drug use. Okay. I mean, dude, and references in popular culture here, there must be 20 bullet points.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
For this one. Yeah. Right. A paragraph in Hesse's 1943 novel, The Glass Bead Game, states that the term Magic Theater is another name for the Glass Bead Game itself.
Ooh.
So there's sort of intertext there. Okay.
Okay.
All right. We're getting there. In the year of his 50th birthday, the first biography of Hesse appeared, written by his friend Hugo Ball. That's a little crazy, man. I'm not that many years away from my 50th, and I don't want a biography written, dude. Even it's not forthcoming, and I wouldn't want it.
Yeah.
Let's avoid that. In any case, obviously Hesse deserved it. Shortly after his new successful novel, he turned away from the solitude of Steppenwolf and started a cohabitation with the art historian Ninen Dolben, née Auslander. And this comes out in his next novel, Narcissus and Goldmund. You familiar with Narcissus and Goldmund?
I'm not. I know it was a big hit, but I don't.
Yeah,
I never read it.
this is another one that like is kind of in the constellation of like 4 or 5 novels that people read, and it's the story of a young man, Goldmund, which means gold mouth, who wanders aimlessly throughout medieval Germany after leaving a Catholic monastery, the one true faith, school in search of what could be described as the meaning in life of life. Narcissus, right, a gifted young teacher at the cloister school, quickly befriends Goldmund. All right, so this is just a pair or two from the beginning of Narcissus and Goldmund. Outside the entrance of the Mariabronn cloister, whose rounded arch rested on slim double columns, a chestnut tree stood close to the road. It was a sweet chestnut with a sturdy trunk and a full round crown that swayed gently in the wind, brought from Italy many years earlier by a monk who had made a pilgrimage to Rome. In the spring, it waited until all the surrounding trees were green, and even the hazel and walnut trees were wearing ruddy foliage before sprouting its own first leaves. Then, during the shortest nights of the year, it drove the delicate white-green rays of its exotic blossoms out through tufts of leaves, filling the air with an admonishing and pungent fragrance. Admonishing and pungent fragrance. In October, after the grape and apple harvests, the autumn wind shook the prickly chestnuts out of the tree's burnished gold crown. The cloister students would scramble and fight for the nuts, and Prior Gregory, who came from the south, roasted them in the fireplace in his room. The beautiful treetop, secret kin to the portal's slender sandstone columns and the stone ornaments of the window vaults and pillars, loved by the Savoyards and Latins, swayed above the cloister entrance, a conspicuous outsider in the eyes of the natives. Generations of cloister boys passed beneath the foreign tree, carrying their writing tablets, chatting, laughing, clowning, and squabbling, barefoot or shod according to the season, a flower or a nut between their teeth or a snowball in their fists. There were always newcomers, and the faces changed every few years, yet most of them resembled one another, if only for their blonde and curly hair. Some stayed for life, becoming novices and monks. They had their hair shorn, donned habit and cincture, read books, taught boys, grew old, died. Others, after finishing their studies, were taken home by their parents to castles or to merchants' and artisans' houses, and then went out into the world and lived by their wits or their crafts. They returned to the cloister occasionally as grown men, bringing their little sons to be taught by the priests, stood for a while smiling pensively at the chestnut tree, then vanished once more. Yeah, I forgot that has kind of the quality of a Siddhartha, but it's set in medieval Europe. Yeah.
Beautiful. It kind of presages the glass bead game too, I think. Yeah. Interesting.
Yep. So that's where he's at. And I want to talk a little bit about Ninen, who had actually written him a letter after reading Peter Kamenzind in 1910. She would only meet him in 1922, and now they're going to get married.
Hey.
And this, according to, this is finally the love of his life. And I think she's half Jewish or Jewish. I don't know, but she's Jewish. And that, of course, would come into play with the war.
Yeah.
So let's see here. I've got a little bit from the biography. They had known one another for a long time. They had exchanged letters as early as 1909, when she was barely 14, and later when she was counted among his admirers during the Demian years. But soon after they met properly during the hectic days of Steppenwolf, she came to fill an important need. Obituaries after her death in 1966 suggest that she supplied some features to Hermione in the final version of the novel. As even her photographs show, she was a perfect embodiment of Hesse's antipodes, male and female, Occident and Orient. Her almond eyes and sensuous mouth in the earlier pictures contrast with the almost mannish severity of her later photographs, and both elements were clearly present in the more mature woman with whom Hesse had now allied himself. Moreover, these same contrasts permeated his new novel, Narcissus and Goldmund, in which she was far more pervasively present, for by then she had become indispensable to Hesse. As the year went on and his eyes hurt as usual, Ninan began to read to him regularly and shared much of his work. As early as the summer of 1927, Hesse reported to Otis that his friend from Vienna was with him, even as he described Hugo Ball's illness in great detail. When Hesse reemerged, therefore, from his latest bout with aches, pains, and depression, he focused on a new home, which he again viewed in terms of feminine ties. Okay, all right. In any case, they meet, and they met again in Zurich in 1926, cultivated a close relationship, and they lived together from 1927 and got married in 1931.
Okay.
Living in Montagnola. So he finds somebody. And this one sticks. Yeah, this one sticks. And eventually she would like read to him because his eyes hurt, and then she would even write for him later in life. So okay.
Yeah, she becomes his amanuensis.
There you go, amanuensis, whatever that is. Yeah, that word I learned. I learned lots of things on Art of Darkness. Yeah. Don't torture your mother. If you're young and listening to this, call your mother.
Call your mom.
Call your mom. Brad, call your mom.
Right.
I'll say a prayer. We got to do it. It never ends, man. It never ends.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we're up to the section called Later Life and Death. So we're coming in home stretch. Hopefully this has been good.
Okay.
In 1931, Hesse left the Casa Camuzzi and moved with Ninan to a larger house, also near Montagnola. Let's look up where that is. I want to know exactly where that is. I feel like it might be Swiss Village, located in the Italian.
Its coat of arms is a big owl.
It's a big green
compass.
owl. Yeah, super cool. Yeah,
that's cool.
Man. Yeah, man. Okay, that was built for him to use for the rest of his life by his friend and patron Hans C. Bodmer. So he's at a point in his life where his friends are like building him houses.
Okay.
You're going to be good. They got married, and this is when he began to plan the Glass Speed Game, aka Magister Ludi.
Mm-hmm.
In 1932, as a preliminary study, he released the novella Journey to the East. You familiar with Journey to the East?
I am not familiar with Journey to the East, other than knowing the title.
I have it right. I happen to have it right here. Can you believe it?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay. And this is a very thin volume. I mean, it's a novella. So
I like the fact that most of his output is these fairly short, pithy things. Yeah.
Listen, I mean, you can make as much impact or damage with if all you did was write Journey to the East, Demian, and SIDDHARTHA, your career is it's not as full as someone like Hesse's, but it's enough. I mean, it's better than not doing it at all.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd like to see the novella make a comeback. I think publishing has shut the novella up. I'd like to see it make a comeback. Yeah, because there's something sweet about a little book I can sit and read in 2 afternoons.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. Yeah. Size doesn't matter.
Well,
I mean, I mean, unofficially. All right. It was my destiny to join in a great experience. Having had the good fortune to belong to the League, I was permitted to be a participant in a unique journey. What wonder it had at the time, how radiant and comet-like it seemed, and how quickly it had been forgotten and allowed to fall into disrepute. For this reason, I have decided to attempt a short description of this fabulous journey, a journey the like of which had not been attempted since the days of Hugo and Mad Roland. Ours have been remarkable times, this period since the World War, troubled and confused, yet despite this fertile. I do not think that I am under any illusion about the difficulties of my attempt. They are very great and are not only of a subjective nature, although these alone would be considerable. For not only do I no longer possess the tokens, mementos, documents, and diaries relating to the journey, but in the difficult years of misfortune, sickness, and deep affliction which have elapsed since then, a large number of my recollections have also vanished. As a result of the buffets of fate and because of the continual discouragement, my memory as well as my confidence in these earlier vivid recollections have become impaired. But apart from these purely personal notes, I am handicapped because of my former vow to the League. For although this vow permits unrestricted communication of my personal experiences, it forbids any disclosures about the League itself. For even though the League seems to have had no visible existence for a long time, and I have not seen any of its members again, no allurement or threat in the world would induce me to break my vow. On the contrary, if today or tomorrow I had to appear before a court-martial and was given the option of dying or divulging the secrets of the League, I would joyously seal my vow to the League with death. All right. So it's a story about this League written from the point of view of a man called HH, and it's a religious sect. And the members include famous fictional and real characters such as Plato, Mozart, Pythagoras, Paul Klee, Quixote, Puss in Boots, Tristram Shandy, Baudelaire. So this is a proto glass bead game.
Yeah,
he's imagined. Yeah. So it's a bit of a Fantasia. This is one you could probably skip over, and unless you're going to be a Hesse maximalist. But it's important because we're coming up to the major work. All right. Now we have to cover the next big war briefly. He observed the rise to power of Nazism in Germany with concern, as one would, from a rather comfortable perch in Switzerland. But yeah, obviously it would affect everyone. So let me see. The current of thought that led him to politics was a non sequitur. It had little to do with money and publishing in Switzerland. A new phase began to open up in his life, which brought to the fore some of his struggles in the 1920s, the hate letters from right-wing students and intellectuals, as well as his anguished and angry responses that led him to reaffirm his attitudes of the First World War. Now, in the very disavowal of political involvement, a new era of political self-consciousness began. So let me see here. I just want to make sure I get this right. Well, let me press on here. So he helped both Brecht and Thomas Mann get into exile. Like when they were coming through Switzerland, like he helped them along their way. So there's a little business about this. I thought I had something about what he published. I'm not sure that he actually published anything at this time. Well, there was a situation where he wrote a letter that was leaked. Let me see. I want to make sure I have it. Yeah, here we go. Hesse's third wife was Jewish, and he had publicly expressed his opposition to anti-Semitism long before then. He was criticized for not condemning the Nazi Party, but his failure to criticize or support any political idea stemmed from his politics of detachment. At no time did he openly condemn the Nazis, although his detestation of their politics is beyond question. Nazism, with its blood sacrifice of the individual to the state and the race, represented the opposite of what he believed in. In March 1933, 7 weeks after Hitler took power, Hesse wrote a correspondent in Germany. It is the duty of spiritual types to stand alongside the spirit and not to sing when people start belting out the patriotic songs their leaders have ordered them to sing. I think another reason Hesse falls through the cracks is that, like, he's not obviously not right wing, but he's not left wing either. Like, nobody can really go, he's our guy. Like, right. It's not gonna work. Yeah. Either way. Yeah.
Which I can respect, honestly. I mean, yeah, well, what he's saying there, you can't just sing along with whatever songs you're being told to sing. Yeah,
100%. I'll do my best to explain the little bit that I'm kind of misplaced here. But in any case, so let's see here. Hesse made a quiet statement of resistance by reviewing and publicizing the work of banned Jewish authors, including our friend of the show, Franz Kafka. In the late 1930s, German journals stopped publishing Hesse's work, and the Nazis eventually banned him. There was a period where I think I read that, like, Goebbels kind of quietly was like, okay, he's fine. And then eventually it was like, nope, we're going to ban him. He's done. He's out. Yeah. Right. So Um, but there was a period where he um or there was a situation where he wrote a letter to like a young soldier, and a newspaper published it, and it was like a private letter kind of
Oh
saying,
no.
yeah. And so yeah, that didn't help his cause.
Huh.
It was supposed to be published privately, um and
Yeah.
that was not helpful. So yeah, kind of a heavy time. What do you think right now about, like, just real briefly, this is a total
Yeah.
aside, but
Sure.
what do you think right now about like the novelist's role in politics right now, Brad? Do me a favor. I want to
Oh,
hear you. I want
oh
to hear
God. Well, see,
it.
I think I I think it's best to try to avoid the object level, like um and this is a lot of my personal biases about the craft of the novel. I think it's best to avoid the real object level, like if you can get out of it, try not to name actual names or actual places. And part of the reason for that is so you can remain somewhat elusive, right? So you could kind of stay out of things. But also, in my personal ethos, novels are not intended to solve problems. That's not what they do. And so when a novel tries to do that politically, tries to like take a stand politically, I think it falls, it can easily become propagandistic, and propaganda is propaganda even when you agree with it. I think people need to be reminded of that, right? So when you see something on television that is propaganda, even if you agree with it, it's still mind control. And
Mm,
one thing I think important to do is to try and steer clear of that as much as possible. And also, I think novels, and this is again my personal thing, I think novels are supposed to make things more complicated and not simplify, not make things more complicated. I think they're best served when they point at the complexities of things rather than simplify them. So, I think the best novels that have political aspects to them usually do at least two things, in my opinion. One is they universalize it, so it's a that political thing, conflict, whatever, is a instantiation of a larger pattern of what it is to be a human being. Um, and then the other thing is to complicate any resolution of it. It's like, yeah, in most cases, everybody's a little bit wrong and a little bit right. And so, yeah, so I think that's more of the job of what a novel is to do, but it's my opinion.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay. And I have some more business about his time during the war. All right.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. In 1934, he chose to discontinue his library of world literature that he was editing rather than comply with his publisher's demand that Jewish authors be deleted. Although
Yeah,
his contentment,
think about that. That's like we're going to make a library of world literature, but don't put
oh,
any Jews in
No
there.
Jews in there. Yeah.
Like,
Jeez.
please.
Yeah. Holy moly. Yeah. Yeah. Dude, come on attractions. I mean,
Right.
we're in a wild time.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is not a political podcast.
No.
Um, Yeah, the public perception of his stance was mixed to the point that he was condemned by both the Nazis, who denounced his anti-German
Mm,
pacifist views and maligned him for promoting the cause of Jewish literature, and by Jewish refugees who criticized him for abetting National Socialism and calling him a Nazi sympathizer. There
yeah.
is some truth to the later allegation. Notwithstanding his enmity for the Nazis, he volunteered for the German army. Um, I
Wait,
don't
in
think he
World War
volunteered.
II?
I don't think he volunteered for World War II. No.
Oh,
Yeah. So this is probably bullshit. But in any case, he also failed to publicly condemn the Nazi Party, and he wanted to be detached. Right. He
yeah.
wanted to have this like middle way. Early in the war, he published an essay in which he clearly applied his middle ground standard, expressing and anticipating German victory, but also insisting that humane values be protected.
Right.
And then this, like, even this wasn't enough, right? You have to
Yeah.
remember this was existential. This was
Right.
like, we are going to, it's us against the world.
Mhm.
Hesse's works were defended in a secret circular in 1937 by Goebbels.
Okay.
But by the end of the decade, German journals ceased publishing Hesse's work, and he was eventually placed on the blacklist in 1943.
The one thing in there really raises my hackles, this idea that he has to say something about it.
Right.
No, nobody has to say anything about anything ever.
Oh, but it's Hesse. He's so important. He's such an important author.
Okay, what is his not statement is also a statement, right? That's right. You know,
right.
I'm not arguing.
Well, and that's the Black Iron Prison. That's the prison of the world where you can't
you got to say something so we can hold it against you later.
Right.
That's what it is. It's almost like a blackmail thing, right?
100%.
We saw that literally is like happening around us right now. It's like you got to say something, and then we'll hold it against you as soon as the facts or whatever changes. We'll hold that against you.
Well, and this says, intriguingly, many Nazis attributed his heresy to two Jews: his Jew wife, right? That's nice, and Freud. Right. So you can't win. I mean, like,
right?
Yeah. I mean, they discounted Hesse as merely a victim of Jewish psychoanalysis. They blamed it all on Freud.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh man.
This is so funny. You have Will Vesper in Die Neue Literatur, the new literature.
Yeah.
He wrote, "Once and for all, it must be made public that Hesse is a classic example of how the Jew can poison the soul of the German people. For if at that time when he took no delight in the war, he had not fallen into the clutches of the Jew Freud and his psychoanalysis, he would have remained the German writer we all loved so well. The warping of his soul can only be ascribed to this Jewish influence." I mean,
this shows you how rigidly clinging on the ideology, you just spiralingly psyop yourself, right?
Yeah, right.
Totally. You know what I mean? It's just like I gotta lie to myself about every one of these steps, and so eventually,
right. Yeah. I mean, and reducing someone, this figure that we've spoken about now for 4.5 hours ish, reducing him to a victim of Freud, as if like in so many ways Hesse is larger than Freud, or as large as Freud. It's just an absurd conceit. All right, so according to Hesse, he survived the years of the Hitler regime and the Second World War through the 11 years of work that he spent on the glass bead game.
Hell yeah.
Das Glasperlenspiel. Love it. Ooh. Beautiful. Yeah, the glass bead game. And they have the first German edition on the Wikipedia. What I wouldn't give to get my hands on that. And I actually have 2 copies of the glass bead game now. Nice. I have an ex libris copy that I'm using. I think, this has made its way. Well, maybe not. In any case, I've got this kind of a little water damaged and warped. I love it. And I'm going to read a little bit from this, and then we're going to bring it on home.
Wonderful.
Before we do the After Dark. Yeah, I love it. I love the title. The Glass Bead Game, a tentative sketch of the life of Magister Ludi, Joseph Knecht, together with Knecht's posthumous writings, edited by Hermann Hesse. Yeah, so again, he's playing that game where it's like, I didn't write this. I'm merely editing this. Yeah. The Glass Bead Game, a general introduction to its history for the layman. Oh, there's some Latin at the beginning.
Uh-oh.
Let me read one sentence of it. Oh no, it's the entire sentence is a paragraph. Let's see. Non entia enim licet quadam modo. Oh no, levibusque homanibus facilius atque incuriosius verbis redere quam entia. Oh my God, that's so terrible. It nailed it. It starts with a bunch of with a bunch of Latin that it doesn't even bother translating. Well, no, there is a translate in Joseph Knecht's holograph translation. For although, in a certain sense, and for light-minded persons, non-existent things can be more easily irresponsibly represented in words than existing things, for the serious and conscientious historian, it is just the reverse. Nothing is harder, yet nothing is more necessary than to speak of certain things whose existence is neither demonstrable nor probable. The very fact that serious and conscientious men treat them as existing things brings them a step closer to existence and to the possibility of being born. And that's the epigraph. You're talking about magic.
Yeah.
It is our intention to preserve in these pages what scant biographical material we have been able to collect concerning Joseph Knecht, or Ludai Magister Josephus III, Josephus III, as he is called in the archives of the Glass Bead Game. We are not unaware that this endeavor runs, or seems to run, somewhat counter to the prevailing laws and usages of our intellectual life. For after all, obliteration of individuality, the maximum integration of the individual into the hierarchy of the educators and scholars, has ever been one of our ruling principles. And in the course of our long tradition, this principle has been observed with such thoroughness that today it is exceedingly difficult and in many cases completely impossible to obtain biographical and psychological information on various persons who have served the hierarchy in exemplary fashion. In very many cases, it is no longer even possible to determine their original names. The hierarchic organization cherishes the ideal of anonymity and comes very close to the realization of that ideal. This fact remains one of the abiding characteristics of intellectual life in our province. If we have nevertheless persisted in our endeavor to determine some of the facts about the life of Ludai Magister Josephus III, and at least to sketch the outlines of his character, we believe we have done so not out of any cult of personality, nor out of disobedience to the customs, but on the contrary, solely in the service of truth and scholarship. It is an old idea that the more pointedly and logically we formulate a thesis, the more irresistibly it cries out for its antithesis. We uphold and venerate the idea that underlies the anonymity of our authorities and our intellectual life, but a glance at the history of that life of the mind we now lead, namely, a glance at the development of the Glass Bead Game, shows us irrefutably that every phase of its development, every extension, every change, every essential segment of its history, whether it be seen as progressive or conservative, bears the plain imprint of the person who introduced the change. He was not necessarily its sole or actual author, but he was the instrument of transformation and perfection. All right. So they're talking about they don't normally do biography, but they're gonna do biography.
I like
does that sound like anybody else you know?
That sounds familiar. Yeah.
That sure does. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1946.
Okay,
right after the war.
Way earlier than I thought.
Right after the war. And Thomas Mann was in his corner all the way. And I've just got a little bit about this. Let's see. Hesse had received the Nobel Prize for Literature for his Glass Bead Game. Thomas Mann had recommended and supported him. It was a singular honor not only for him personally, but also for the institution of German literature, to which, despite all the arguments about his Swiss citizenship, he naturally belonged. So the war has just ended. Now we're giving the Nobel Prize to a German language and a German author. Almost like an olive branch.
Yeah, it's like an attempt at I can see that. Yeah. Doesn't mean he didn't deserve it.
No, he certainly did. It was, in fact, a liberating event for many Germans to see a German writer honored so soon after the end of the war. Hesse did not travel to Stockholm, but he sent the usual, though in his case rather truncated, message. It was a very brief document, less than 2 pages, that he sent for the Nobel celebrations on the occasion of Alfred Nobel's birthday on December 10th. His apologies were linked to a statement about his sacrifice to National Socialism. He could not attend because his always fragile health had been totally ruined by the heavy stress he had to suffer since 1933, which had ruined his entire life's work in Germany and had burdened him with ever heavier duties. He then took the opportunity to stress international understanding and culture, while at the same time expressing his gratitude that a poet and a work in the German language had been chosen for the honor as an evident gesture of reconciliation after the war. Finally, he praised his Swedish hosts and Sweden as a country for its international spirit and its individual culture that would not infringe upon the wealth of differentiation in human culture as a whole. The words were read at the celebration. A surprise party took place in any event, although Hesse had not wanted it at first. His wife had insisted on staying with him on the day the prize was conferred. And so they have like a little restaurant celebration that was canceled, and the Hesses were invited instead to spend the evening at a doctor friend's house where the surprise occurred. And, a huge fire was lit in the fireplace. And yeah, so he's made, he's done.
Nice.
He's top of the mountain.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, he
Nice.
did it. He did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did
Yeah.
it. All right. And we're on to the last. Oh, here it is. I missed this place. I think I misplaced this. 1 second. I
Mhm.
want to.
One thing I can say about
Yeah,
Glass
yeah.
Bead Game,
Mhm.
just for people who are reading it, do not the very back of it is comprised of three stories, like fictional biographies purportedly written by the main character of the Glass Bead Game. I think they were done as like exercises as part of his educational training. Do not sleep on those. They are really, really good. In fact, I think maybe my favorite piece in the end, maybe my favorite piece of writing by him is one of these stories that he has sort of packed at the back. And it feels like it's just like appendix material, but they're great.
Awesome. So this is the letter to a young German that I got a little out of order. It's been we're four and a
Yeah.
half hours into the episode, but
Yeah.
he wrote this in 1946,
And this is the one
and
that was published publicly, but not intended to
this
be.
right, and this was in
Yeah.
46.
Okay.
So yeah, let me just see if I can, because it's on a page that's a little, and my eyes are starting to get a little bit tired here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And he wrote this. So this letter, written in the spring of 1946, was meant for Louise Rinser. It appeared in numerous newspapers as an open letter. So that's great. It's
Mm.
strange about letters from your country, Germany. For months, a letter from Germany was a strange and almost joyful event for me. It brought news that a friend I had been worried about, of whom I had long heard nothing, was still alive. And it gave me a glimpse, haphazard and unreliable as it might be, of the country which speaks my language, to which I have entrusted my life work, and which up to a few years ago gave me my bread and the moral justification for my work. Such letters always came as a surprise, were confined to matters of importance, and contained no idle chatter. Often they were written in great haste. Then the letters became more frequent and longer. Many of these gave me no pleasure at all, and I had little desire to answer them. A prisoner in France, no youngster, but already a married man with children, a well educated industrialist with a university degree, asked me what my opinion. In my opinion, a decent, well-intentioned man should have done in the Hitler period. A man in his position, he argued, could not have prevented anything that happened or opposed Hitler in any way. That would have been madness. It would have cost him his livelihood, his freedom, and in the end, his life. I could only reply that the devastation of Russia and Poland, the siege of Stalingrad, and the lunacy of holding it to the bitter end must also have involved certain dangers, but the German soldiers had flung themselves into these pursuits with abandon. And why had the German people failed to see through Hitler before 1933? Oughtn't so early an event as the Munich Putsch have shown them what he was? Why, instead of upholding and nurturing the German Republic, the one gratifying consequence of the First World War, had they become almost unanimous in sabotaging it, voting for Hindenburg and later for Hitler, under whom, to be sure, it became very dangerous to behave like a decent human being? For instance, there are all the old acquaintances who had written to me for years, but stopped when they found out that I was under close surveillance, and that corresponding with me could have very unpleasant consequences. Now they informed me they are still in the land of the living, and they have always thought of me with affection and envied my good fortune at living in the paradise of Switzerland, and that, as I must be well aware, they had never sympathized with those damned Nazis. But many of these old acquaintances were party members for years. Now they tell me how they had one foot in the concentration camp all those years, and I am obliged to reply that the only anti-Nazis I can take seriously are those who had both feet in a camp, not one in a camp and the other in the party.
Mm.
More. Then there are the simple souls, former members of the youth movement, who write me that they joined the party about 1934 after a severe inner struggle for no other purpose than to provide a salutary counterweight to the savage, brutal elements, and so on. Others have private complexes. They live in utter misery. They have serious worries, and yet they find paper, ink, time, and energy to write me long letters expressing their contempt for Thomas Mann and their indignation that I should be friends with such a man. Another group consists of former colleagues and friends who openly and unreservedly supported Hitler's triumphal progress all through the years. Now they write me touchingly friendly letters telling me all about their daily lives, their bomb damage and domestic cares, their children and grandchildren, as though nothing had happened, as though nothing had come between us, as though they had not helped to kill friends and relatives of my wife, who is Jewish, and to discredit and destroy my life's work. Not one of them says that he repents, that he sees it, things in an entirely different light today that he was deluded. And not one of them says that he was and intends to remain a Nazi, that he regrets nothing, that he stands by his guns. Find me a Nazi who has stood by his guns when things began to go wrong. These people are sickening. A few of the letter writers expect me to switch my allegiance to Germany, to come back and help to re-educate the people. A good many more call on me to raise my voice in the outside world, to protest as a neutral and humanitarian against the commissions and omissions of the occupying powers. How can they be so naive, so utterly ignorant of the world and the times, so touchingly, embarrassingly childish? I have grown old and tired, and the destruction of my work has given my last years a ground base of disillusionment and sorrow. Among the good things which I am still able to enjoy, which still give me pleasure and compensate for the dark side, are the rare but undeniable indications that an authentic spiritual Germany lives on. I neither seek nor find them in the bustling of its present culture manufacturers and fair weather Democrats, but in such gratifying manifestations of determination, alertness, and courage, of goodwill and of confidence shorn of illusions as your letter. I thank you for it. Preserve the seed, keep faith with the light and the spirit. There are very few of you, but you may be the salt of the earth.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, the authentic spiritual Germany lives on in the Americana as well. We're not going anywhere, people.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Even though we live in the post-apocalypse. We can still podcast through the apocalypse.
That's right.
What do you think about that, Brad? I got a couple more letters, and then we're just going to bring it in.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I do like about it is it's living in the complexities, personal complexities, and historical. Yeah, I don't know what to say about it other than I do admire. You feel him taking this moment and sort of feeling or looking at all, not necessarily all sides of it. He's not even really pitting one side against the other, but there is this sense of handling the whole thing carefully and thinking to the future, but thinking to the past. It's quite. I don't know. What do you think of it?
I think it can tell us a lot about our current day. Like the person who was all in on COVID, they're awfully quiet now,
right?
And
right.
the winds of and whatever you feel about that, either way. I mean, things move real fast,
right?
And 2 or 3 years is an eternity.
Yeah.
And that war ended, and people put their lives back together and picked up their correspondence with their old pals, their old famous friends, and acted like nothing happened.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that is not a period of madness. That is the default of human experience. That's simply how people are.
Yeah.
So I have a letter here. This is something he wrote to that fellow Bodmer who built the house in 1946. I have had to read a lot of derogatory letters from Germany again because a Munich newspaper has printed the letter to Germany without ever asking or receiving permission. I was asked at the same time whether I would accept the Goethe Prize, for which I had been unanimously proposed. I was very opposed to the idea, but was persuaded to the contrary. I asked some extremely precise questions and ascertained that the prize committee had acted courageously and irreproachably under Goebbels. By the way, the whole affair is a mere formality, since I shall, of course, not receive 1 cent of the prize money. For the past 14 days, I have been trying to get some rest here, but without much success, and so on and so forth. Here's just another little bit about another letter. I'm heading off tomorrow, and this is 46. I'm heading off tomorrow for a sanitarium, and my house will remain empty for several months at least, and so weiter and so forth. This idea, I love that idea. He's like, I'm out of here.
Yep.
Let me see. I just want to make sure that I get. This is a letter to his son, Heiner, in 48. There's something on the way to you for your birthday, along with my best wishes. We had Frau Giraud here for a few weeks. She was ill, and my poor Berlin publisher and his wife spent a few days with us. Then, 2 weeks ago, after months of senseless worries and excitements, our Romanian refugees finally arrived, Ninan's only sister and her husband. They have lost their homeland and have not yet found a country willing to issue them an immigration visa. They were only allowed into Switzerland as my guests for a brief period of recuperation. They couldn't take a single penny along. Even in Bucharest, they weren't allowed to buy the tickets. We had to send money for the journey, etc., by messenger to the Hungarian border. At least they are out of Romania, having narrowly escaped a frightful end, since they are not only undesirable intellectuals, but also Jews, and Romania prides itself on not being any less anti-Semitic now that it is communist and loyal to Stalin than it was under Hitler or Antonescu. They are systematically liquidating the entire section of the population to which Ninan's people belong. Naturally, we were going to harbor both of them at our place. Well, that muddies the water. You're telling me you're telling me they're still liquidating Jews under Stalin? Hold the fort.
Wait.
What? In any case, I just want to give an idea of sort of his, the amount of just his voice and his letters in this old age. Okay.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, good stuff. All right. So, is there anything that I'm missing from these letters? I mean, they're wild. There's just so much stuff here.
I want 150 pages of letters a day, man.
Dude, there's so much. And he reached a point where he was right. He basically had a mailing list. Okay, and I'm going to read one of his mailing list letters from 1952.
Okay.
Or a couple paragraphs, and then we'll be done.
Yeah.
Dear friends, a circular letter was never more called for than now. It will have to answer a large portion of the roughly 1,200 letters that I received on the occasion of my 75th birthday. Oh. And I have never had such difficulty sitting down to write. That may be due to old age, the incredible heat wave, all the mail with which I have to contend. In any case, you ought not expect too much from this letter. It's only intended as a thank you note and brief account of the occasion. What one wishes for in youth, one receives in excess as an old man, says Goethe. And it's happening to me too. Some, not all, of my most intense dreams as a boy and adolescent have been fulfilled, some in such excess that I now find them embarrassing and distressing. My wildest fantasies as a child never encompassed these presents and honors: a marketplace in my charming little hometown adorned with flags, a concert by the town's musicians, a ceremonial speech, the unveiling of a plaque on the house where I was born, and also congratulations from the mayors of many cities, including ones that named a street after me. Congratulations from school classes in Germany and Switzerland. The awarding of honorary titles, festivals, with or without music, in theaters, town halls, schools, speeches by federal presidents, famous writers, professors. That's not what I had expected or wanted. And whenever I was in a good mood, the following thought would occur to me. All that is missing now is a stone pedestal 2 meters high and a little ladder. Then I could get up there and begin my new life as a monument.
They're
putting him out to pasture.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All right.
You see that even then he's not a joiner. It's like even when everybody loves him, it's still like, do I really have to be part of this? Like, yeah, I respect that.
There's so much wit in his writing, and there's modesty. Despite the fact that he's describing all of this, you shouldn't expect too much from this letter. And then he goes on and writes like this banger. Right. Yeah. It's just like, and of course you're going to read that when it comes in the mail.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see here. During the last 20 years of his life, Hesse wrote many short stories. He also wrote ironic essays about his alienation from writing, some of which I have sort of touched on. He spent much of his time pursuing his interest in watercolors. He also occupied himself with the steady stream of letters he received as a result of the Nobel Prize, and as a new generation of German readers explored his work. In one essay, he reflected wryly on his lifelong failure to acquire a talent for idleness and speculated that his average daily correspondence exceeded 150 pages. Which is crazy.
Right.
And this is it. Gradually, the Hesse's lives began to conform more and more to an old man's pace. Although he continued to enjoy his garden and his outdoor walks, Ninan still needed her journeys to Greece, which she took as long as she felt she could leave her ailing husband in another's care. In the spring of 1954, she went on a scholarly tour guided by trained archaeologists and returned exhausted but most satisfied. Meanwhile, death continued to take his friends all around him. Peter Surkamp died in 1959, and many others among his contemporaries died during the 1950s. Two statements to Erwin Akkerknecht, to whom he wrote more and more often in his old age, may typify what he felt as he established the counterpoint of pain to his long life of honors. In May of 1954, he wrote about his eyes, which now began to interfere even with his main relaxation, gardening. His eyes were affected so strongly that I sit around for days with tearing, painful eyes, which are good for nothing. When I think of death, the idea that it will mean a cessation of this small private hell of mine makes it most agreeable. Half my life has been dimmed by it. And during the following year, in 1955, he sent Akkerknecht a photograph of himself, visibly aged, his hands clasped in his lap. In the caption, he wrote, "Dear Dr. Akkerknecht, ja, this is how we sit around when our sack has gone to pot. With warmest regards, your H.H." As early as 1950, Hesse had already given voice to the feeling that had been with him since his early manhood, but which now in old age began to assume a different kind of reality. Sliding down into old age and weakness has made great progress during this year. How good that our life has its limits, that one is certain of the end. It is the only security in a human life, which in other respects, the existentialists don't understand very well. Their last years until 1962 turned on a more and more quiet life for the aging man, with Ninan taking on some of the relationships and some of the hasty movements from place to place that had marked Hermann Hesse's life. She read to him and continued to take his dictation. She sorted out and presented his correspondence to him as his eyesight failed him more and more. And it goes on. Mm-hmm. Let me see. Let's see. Here we go. The narrow pass was crossed at last 6 years after he had written a certain letter. According to Ninan, in an open letter to the Surkamp Verlag in the fall after his death, Hesse's latent leukemia, which is what would get him, had flared into an acute stage only in December 1961 as a result of a bout of influenza. At his 85th birthday, this is crazy, he lived into the 60s, on July 2nd, the celebration was as generous as ever. More than 900 presents, letters, flowers, and telegrams had been received by the end of 3 days of celebrations. The intimate birthday party took place at a restaurant in a village near the St. Gotthard Pass, attended by the closest family and hosted by Max Vosmer. But there were also official fates. On Saturday night, the local Philharmonia Liberale serenaded him, and on Sunday, Hermann Hesse, an official citizen of Bern, was proclaimed honorary citizen of Montagnola. He responded with a few words in Italian, a language he rarely spoke, although he had lived in their midst half his life. He received an ovation. He was their most famous citizen. 5 weeks later, he died during the night of August the 9th in 1962 of a brain hemorrhage.
85 years old, though. That's a pretty good run.
Pretty good run. Yeah. All right. He was buried in the cemetery of Sant Abbondia in Gentilino, where his friend and biographer Hugo Ball and another German personality, the conductor Bruno Walter, are also buried. And that was the life of Hermann Hesse.
Wow. Well, Kevin, I think you've redeemed him. I think now sophisticated book Twitter folks can freely read the great Hermann Hesse.
I feel like, but isn't it embarrassing to read Kafka and to eat pomegranates or something? Didn't somebody say that? Did Book Talk can't ruin anything for us. We're the Art of Darkness podcast. We're bigger than Book Talk. We're bigger than Book Talk. All of Book Talk combined. Come at me. Come at me, bro. Yeah. Tell me what I could read and be sophisticated about. You tell me. You Barnes and Noble shopping, tote bag carrying. Come at me.
Yeah, who are we supposed to read? Who are we allowed to read?
Who are we? Yeah, who are we allowed to read? You tell me.
Yeah.
This guy makes me proud to be German. He does.
Right.
I mean, he's all of ours. Yeah. I mean, this guy was an internationalist. This guy had a lot to say to Americans. Later, we're going to talk more about it on the After Dark for Patreon, patreon.com/artofdarkpod. We got to ask the closing question, but I'm going to tease the Patreon first.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah. So on the After Dark for Patreon, we're going to read from Leary's essay, Timothy Leary's essay on Hesse.
Oh, excellent. Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about a little bit of the correspondence between Jung and Hesse. We also have, we're going to talk about his influence writ large.
Okay.
I also have a contrapoint essay to maybe how Leary's trip isn't going to get you all the way.
Okay.
And those are just some of the things we're going to talk about in After Dark. I think After Dark is going to be a nice, good, long one.
Okay.
We're going to have fun. Brad and I are going to cut loose. I'm going to get some more of Brad's ideas.
Okay.
Brad, what do you think Hesse would be doing today if he was still alive? And let's say in his prime.
I mean, let's say he just finished. We got him when he just finished Glass Bead Game. I feel like there is a magnum opus quality to Glass Bead Game, and I feel like he did sort of run up against writer's block, but I think at some point if his he weren't aging, his body weren't kind of deteriorating, the stress hadn't built up, I think he would stay in the novel form. He's got it in him to write Demian in 3 weeks or whatever. I think maybe you would start to see more like, I almost feel like he would revert a little bit, and I don't want to say revert. It's not regressing or digressing, but I think he might turn back to the shorter novella, right? These very distinct, sharp, incisive, beautifully rendered, shorter works, and just crank them out.
I love it,
think?
and
yeah,
I think he might write more poems.
Okay, yeah.
He's of everybody we've covered, he's the most natural writer, the most total writer, and what a joy to bring him in the course of this episode out of the asylum.
Yeah.
To the Nobel Prize.
Oh, I love seeing guys win.
I love seeing guys win. Dudes rock.
Yeah.
Dudes rock.
Women too. I like seeing people win.
Yeah, we like seeing people win. And listen, and No More Brother Wars, he was ahead on that. I mean, boy, if we could unwind and not have World War I happen, imagine how different our world would be now.
Yeah.
Just a lot to be recommended. I hope I've given people a good introduction. I think he might write some poems, and I'm going to close out with a poem. After which we will be back for the After Dark for Patreon, patreon.com/artofdarkpod. Brad, as ever, thank you so much for coming along on this ride.
Thanks to you, man. That was great.
And thank you for a great year, man. Happy New Year.
Oh, yeah. We killed it.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. Yeah.
This is called The Poet. Get your motor running. I'm kidding.
Nice.
You see what I'm doing here?
Yeah.
Okay. This is called The Poet. Only on me, the lonely one, the unending stars of the night shine. The stone fountain whispers its magic song. To me alone, to me, the lonely one. The colorful shadows of the wandering clouds move like dreams over the open countryside. Neither house nor farmland, neither forest nor hunting privilege is given to me. What is mine belongs to no one. The plunging brook behind the veil of the woods, the frightening sea, the bird whir of children at play, the weeping and singing lonely in the evening of a man secretly in love. The temples of the gods are mine also, and mine, the aristocratic groves of the past, and no less the luminous vault of heaven in the future is my home. Often in full flight of longing, my soul storms upward to gaze on the future of blessed men. Love overcoming the law, love from people to people. I find them all again nobly transformed. Farmer, king, tradesman, busy sailors, shepherd and gardener, all of them gratefully celebrate the festival of the future world. Only the poet is missing, the lonely one who looks on, the bearer of human longing, the pale image of whom the future, the fulfillment of the world has no further need. Many garlands wilt on his grave, but no one remembers him.
Well, we remember you, Hermann.
We do.
Yeah.
We'll be back. Brad, thanks again. Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
More to come. We're just getting started, people.
Oh, yeah.